We are
Short.
ready. We're, yeah, right. Okay, so I will call this session of the Board of Revision to order. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Treaty 1 territory in the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. With me on the panel today is Gisela Rempel. We are missing Brent McIntyre, who might join us, I guess, if his morning session finishes soon. And the assessor today is Mark Colatulio, and the secretary is Kelsey Harrison. We'll be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that applicants or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We'll then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the Board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. If you've not already done so, could you please turn off your phones? So, we'll have the swearing in.
Would you please state your name?
Mark Colatulio.
And do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Would you please state your name?
Rocky Newfeld.
And do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
And so all of these today are just value. There's no issues other than value. Is that correct?
I believe so.
All right. So we begin with 276 Marion Street. And Mr. Colatulio, if you could please begin.
File number 19-4724, the roll number 0607-505-5500. The address is 276 Marion Street and the owner 276 Marion Street Incorporated. Roll year 2020 with an April 1st, 2018 reference date. The assessed value under appeal, $1,630,000. Classification is 60 and taxable for this property. We have one building with 5 premises with an actual year built of 1989. Total leasable area on file for this property, 9,942 square feet. If you flip to page 2 of the brief, you'll see that the owner has responded to all of our requests for income information, including a 2017 property sale questionnaire. We have a sale March 7th of 2017, and the sale price consideration 1.7 million, and the sworn value matches at 1,700,000. Prior to that, there's a dollar sale, not very relevant to today's discussion. We do have some leases showing for the subject property. The rental range varies from between $10.75 upwards to $14.94. If you flip to page 3, you'll see the rental comparables I've used for this property. There is a range again, and it's page 3 and 4 has the rental comparables. It looks like we're looking at a range from between as low as $10 a square foot net rent to as high as $23 a square foot in regards to net rent. If you flip to page 5, you'll see the income workup as produced by the model for this property. Again, total leasable area here, 9,942 square feet. The modeled rents range between $10.22 and $14.71 for a total potential rent of $116,428. The vacancy loss at 4%, non-recoverable expense allowance at 2%, and shortfall at $7 a square foot for a net operating income of $106,752. The cap rate applied by the model, 6.55, for a capitalized and rounded value at $1,630,000. Page 6 is just a summary of that same income workup. Page 7, you'll see a map view of the subject parcel. This is an interior lot located on Marion Street. It's a strip mall.
Well, I've got different page numbering. Do you have?
Is there no numbers?
Is there something? No, there is numbering. Summary is page 5 in this one. Is there something that we are missing?
Oh, you know what it is? Sometimes when I compress the table, like I redact the tenant names on the copies you guys get. So sometimes it
okay.
it misses a
You've
page. So
gone
yeah, I
on.
guess you guys are on a different page. So
Okay.
it'll be your page 6 for the subject parcel,
Yep.
the map view. Page 7 through 8 is just some additional photos, some aerial photos showing the subject property, showing the parking area at both the front on Marion Street and to the rear of the property off the back lane. Page 8 is just street view of the subject property showing that there are tenants in place. Page 9 is the property income and expense questionnaire as submitted by the owner. So they actually leave the property sale question, or the income and expense questionnaire blank, as well as the tenant verification form. Instead, they opt to just send a rent roll, which is located on page 13, and an annual statement on page 14 through 16. So if we flip to page 13, for you guys, we'll be looking at the rent roll. So you can see the lease is in place here, and the rent varies, again, between $10.75 a square foot upwards to $14.93. And if you flip to page 14, you'll see the annual statement. The only thing I'll point out here is that because they purchased this property in March of 2017, they don't actually have a full year's worth of financial data here. It's just 10 months. So keep that in mind when you're reviewing the statements. If you flip to page 17, you'll see the property sale questionnaire. So in this instance, I did some investigation into the sale on top of the standard sales verification process that we have, which is to send out a property sale questionnaire to the new owner and get some information in regards to that transaction. This is what was submitted back to us. I did do some additional company searches just to try to see the nature of the relationship between the vendor and the purchaser. It did appear that this was part of a larger portfolio sale. However, they still have allocations registered with the land titles office in regards to sworn values for each individual property. So when we're looking at this, we're looking at the consideration paid of 1.7 million and the sworn value to match. Now on this property sale questionnaire, they do indicate that this is an arm's length open market transaction. That's shown on question 3. Question 4, you'll see that they also indicate that there's no other items other than the real estate included in the purchase price. Question 5, they indicate that there was an appraisal or opinion of value completed on the property at the time of sale. However, the gentleman who filled out this form indicated that there was no permission to give that and that the appraisal was copyrighted. So we don't have that information to review. And the reason we bring up the sworn value is, it's been suggested to us in the past that it's inappropriate to look at these portfolio sales as an indication of market value. However, in Manitoba, you do have to register with the land titles office for the purposes of paying your land transfer tax. And part of that is putting in an affidavit of value, a sworn statement of the fair market value. So we did look at that as an indication. Now, the value is model-driven, so it's not that we're hanging our hat on one particular sale, but I do think it is relevant to the discussion today. Page 19 for you guys would be our standard cap rate table. In this instance, we have this tagged as a strip mall. So our 20th percentile for strip malls is 6.4% and our 80th percentile is 7.05%. You'll see that the Q1 2018 Colliers study has between 6 and 6.75. CBRE has between 6.5 and 7.5, and Cushman and Wakefield between 5.75 and 7 for the cap rate. So the cap rate as applied by the model does fall within what we're seeing not only from the city's perspective of analyzing data between the 20th and 80th percentile, but also from the third-party publications that are putting out cap rate studies. Beyond that is just some excerpts from the Municipal Assessment Act on page 20 and the standard addenda package that's attached to the back of the brief, and that goes through to the back of the brief. And that is my presentation for this property. I'm open to any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Neufeld?
Yes, in regard to the, I'll start off, first question, page my 4 and 5.
Okay.
Was the valuation entirely from the model?
Yes.
And were there any overrides on this?
I don't believe so, no.
The questionnaires that you've produced here, I take it that these were received separately, one being a income and expense and the other being a sales questionnaire?
Correct, yeah. So if you look on page...
Just, they're separate, that's all I was asking.
Correct, yeah.
Now, oh, sorry, just so that, before I go down, if we spend a little time on here, point out to the board that 6 of the properties on our docket today are the same ownership group. So there will be something the same for all of them.
Correct, yeah.
Good.
This income questionnaire, aren't you missing some pages that were submitted? The title page.
I may be, like the property sale questionnaire?
No, the income and expense questionnaire.
The cover letter that
Yes,
goes with
the
it?
cover
Yeah,
letter.
it is not in here.
Now,
It's not in the brief.
I can get a copy of it here, or you can confirm what I'm saying. Did the cover letter not state that you should be not putting reliance on this data for creation of your model or any other use? That it was solely to comply with the legislative requirements?
I'd have to see the document to answer. I don't know the exact wording of that letter.
Okay, well, we'll supply it before the end of the hearing.
Sure.
So I'm saying, so you weren't aware that there was caution given by the ownership group?
I'm saying there may be, I just don't know the exact wording of that document.
And you are able to confirm that this was a multi-role sale?
It does appear that there was multiple parcels that transacted on the same day. I don't know
And you are aware that the IAAO has a standard not to use multi-role sales in creation of ratio studies or mass appraisal?
Correct. Now, the IAAO is an international organization, so obviously by...
Which the city is a member of and states here on pages 25 and 26 that they adhere to their standards, correct?
I just believe that the IAAO standard portion is in regards to the ratio studies.
Do you think you can pick and choose the standard when you're a member?
I don't believe
can't.
that we're bound by the IAAO.
No, you can't pick and choose.
Yeah, but I don't believe that we're a member of the
You are a
IAAO. I don't
member.
believe that the legislation suggests that we need to follow those standards.
It's not legislation, it's a voluntary organization. Okay. So, you are aware that on several previous occasions when these properties have been brought before the board and also specific, including page 24, your sample cap rates of 3166 Portage and 3670 Roblin, that in general, the assessor has agreed that there is a lack of reliability in these multi-role sales?
We definitely have been made aware by yourself that these are part of a portfolio sale, and it has been cautioned to the board before that these are part of a portfolio sale, for sure.
Page 17, question number 1.
Okay?
Do you know why they didn't answer that question?
No, I can't speak to the
Okay.
logic behind how this form was filled out.
Okay, well, that's fine. But they said, they were asked, is the consideration correct? They did not answer that question.
Correct, yeah, they put not aware as the answer.
Right, and the person who signed is the property manager at Colliers, correct?
It does appear that way, yes.
Can't read my own writing here. On page 19, which category in the capitalization rates does this come from?
So this would fall under strip mall.
Strip mall, okay.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned about 3 different organizations who publish their own numbers. Why is there such a wide variance in these organizations? Do you know?
I'm not too sure, to be honest. There could be slight variations in the methodology of calculating those cap rates, but I can't speak to that.
That's a good answer. I would agree. The statement itself, you mentioned you had 7 months, and you have the rent roll. Now, did you review this? Is this what style of leases are these?
I believe there's 10 months of data there, but let me get that rent roll.
But they're a mix of net and semi-gross leases.
It does appear that way, yes. Yeah, it doesn't appear that these are all net leases.
Does your model account for items that are lacking, and in this particular case, the parking bylaw being short of the amount of spaces needed?
No, and in this instance, the current use would constitute a legal non-conforming use.
Correct.
But no, the model does not make any adjustment to account for its status as a non-conforming use, a
But-
legal non-conforming use.
We're not concerned about the legality of it. We know it's to be legal, but the question is, if you're valuing this as a strip mall, don't you need to have enough parking space to fit that category of strip mall?
I would say you'd need the amount of parking to comply with the zoning bylaw.
Right.
But like it's currently legally non-conforming to that bylaw. So I don't know if it's necessarily relevant unless there was a change or proposed redevelopment of the property.
Well, a change in tenancy, correct?
I don't know if it's retail tenants. I don't think they would have any issues having new tenants go in.
Well, the tenancies, start date on the tenancies on your list, one started in 2012 and the latest one in 2016. And we have leases that expire between 19 and 25. So at that point, wouldn't you believe that this matter could come up with the turnover in tenancy and the requirement for a new occupancy permit?
I'm not certain that it would. I think it would depend on if there was a redevelopment plan in place for this property. I think if you just had retail tenants going into existing retail space, the usage wouldn't change, and therefore the legal non-conforming status would still be in place.
Are you suggesting that a new tenant could take over the occupancy permit of the?
No, I'm not
tenant?
suggesting that
Okay.
at all, yeah.
All right, so, but it's fair to say that your knowledge base on this is probably at a preliminary level.
I haven't personally had to deal with any change in regards to occupancy permits or complying to parking bylaw. I have done some review work with the legislation and the Winnipeg bylaws that are in place in regards to parking.
Okay.
But I mean, I wouldn't say with full confidence that I'm aware of all the ins and outs of the.
That's all I was, thank you, those are my questions.
Ms. Rempel, questions?
I only have one question, and that is with regards to the assessment and pardon me, the property sale questionnaire.
Sure.
Is it standard practice not to include the cover sheet?
So when I'm building my briefs, I only include the actual documents. I mean, some assessors may do it differently, where they include everything that was sent out. But for brevity's sake, and I usually just include the actual mailers that were submitted back to us.
Thank you.
Do you have a blended rate for the?
I could calculate you one, if you're talking about the rents
Sure.
that are applied by the model. Just give me one moment.
Sorry, one, I thought it was just one.
The model
rents.
rents is what you're
The
asking
model
about?
rents, yeah.
Yeah, so
The
if we
blended rate
take
for the
the
model.
potential rent of 116,428 and divide it by the 9942 of leasable area, you'd get a blended rent of $11.71 rounded.
Thank you. The vacancy at 4%, that is standard for all strip malls?
Yes, I believe so. Actually, I'm not 100% certain. I know that if it was under this STP classification, like if you look at the top of that page 4, I believe you guys would look at, we show income stream 1 STP strip mall. The same parameter, like if you had a different address, the same parameters should apply for the vacancy and the 2% non-recoverable expense allowance and shortfall.
Do you know anything about the history of vacancy in this mall? Has there been vacancy? Is it?
No, to me, based on my review, it appears that there's tenants in place. They don't indicate any sort of vacancy concerns on the property sale questionnaire or the rent roll. To me, it looks like it's leased up.
Did you inspect the property?
I did not have a chance to inspect this property. I've driven by the property a few times, but I've never gone into the property to inspect.
Do you know anything about its condition?
The only thing that we have in regards to the condition, if you look at the property sale questionnaire, they actually fill out a question in regards to the condition. I believe they indicated that the property was listed in fair condition. Yeah, if you look at page 17, at the bottom of that page, there's a section, property characteristics, question 15. They indicate fair.
And I'm correct in understanding that they said no to the question, do you intend to make major repairs or improvements? Okay.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
My next question was, do you know anything about whether major improvements are required? They've said no, according to this
Correct, yeah,
form.
correct.
Okay. All right, that's all my questions. Mr. Neufeld.
Thank you. This is rebuttal for this property and all the other ones owned by, the corporation's called P3, the 6. I think I have enough copies.
Thank you.
Oh, because we're short a board member, yeah, that's for sure I got enough copies for the file.
And this is rebuttal of what aspect?
The sale price.
Of sale price.
Thank you. And I understand it's a limited reliability on valuation, but I feel that it's been, it's prejudicial, and therefore some understanding has to be made of this. So I'll follow the protocol and just discuss rebuttal first. The document here is a definition of investment value, and this is from the Appraisal Institute. So the first line says it all, the value of a specific property to a particular investor. It's not market value. So the subject property, along with, I think, 13 other sites, were sold in a bulk sale from a gentleman by the name of Frank Spivak to a company called Private Pension Partners. They put the emphasis on pension. This is an investment fund that has a long-range viewpoint on value. They're looking at buying undervalued assets and through professional management, looking for specific properties that have an upside to them, and then they take a 10-year window to turn them around. And at that point, then the profits start kicking in. Now, this means that the sale has nothing to do with market. It wasn't purchased on that basis. It was purchased on a 10-year plan. Now, the next 2 pages in here show the concept of a DCF valuation, which is generally used to do this. Then the we just did this morning, the ink's still fresh. There's a chart called Example of DCF Analysis when you do investment. So under this basis, you take a 10-year window and you look at revenues and you increase your revenues. And in there, you also account for costs that you incur. You have vacancies pop up, commissions go off, work comes off, vacancy rates change, but income continues to rise. The reasoning behind it is, and if you look at the assessor's brief on the rent roll, that you'll see that there are several properties, several tenants that don't get full recovery. They are Ink Noir and Chicken Chef. And we also know that the other ones are only recovering at a lower rate, which doesn't meet the expenses. So the goal is, this is why it's a 10-year window, because you're dealing with 5-year leases generally. In some cases, they're a bit longer. At the end of each lease, you change the terms. You go for full recovery, and you increase the property's value by not so much, like you could even give them a rent decrease, but you're trying to offset the uncertainty of the expenses onto the tenant, which means that the investor will have a more secure investment, because then you're just worried about rental revenue as you're you don't have to worry about if you're covering the utilities, that you have a bad weather year and you're paying more on utilities, or in the case of the Chicken Chef, that they use more utilities because they're cooking more chicken, because they're busier. That's the goal on these sites, and that's why they would do this on the DCF. So in this particular property, this is just an example of how it's done. Then you estimate a sale at the end of the 10-year term, at which point, because you've now converted to net, your cap rate can be driven down. Then you take the entire value and you say, on this basis, this is what my property is going to be worth at the end of it. And the simple way to look at that is the cash flow that flows through it. This is not the subject. This was an actual property, by the way, and I don't know which one it was because I want to make sure it was anonymous. But this is the type of valuation that one does on that. And so anything concerning these is an investment sale. Now, the actual window on these sales on P3 is 20 years, 10 years of building, 10 years of profit taking. That's their concept. And like it says, they're all about a private pension fund, which means that if you're already at retirement age, you're not going to invest in this property. If you're 10, 20 years away from retirement age, it's an attractive tool. No income for the beginning, higher income at the end. The idea is, if you had your yield, which is basically your cap rate on the early years, is going to be under 5%. But at the end of the 10-year period, when you finish doing your work on it, you could have returns. And remember, you're working on the equity side, not the cap side. You could have 15% returns, because then you borrow money, you take a mortgage out, and your equity works only a third as hard as it has to, so you get better returns. So this is an explanation of their model. Doesn't fit assessment models in any way whatsoever. Lastly, on this handout, I wanted to give you an idea of a very complex DCF. And this is one that I did, and I got permission to do this. This is for a potash mine. And in this particular one, I was working out a 14-year contribution rate to the province as to how their tax revenues would increase on this potential mine. And this is an example of an investment value. You'll note in the first 4 years, nothing's coming out of the ground, and then 10 years of stuff coming out of the ground. This is a type of valuation that ad valorem assessment will never see or be concerned with. And this is a sale that is in that mold. The last comment in rebuttal is the sale itself. Many of the vendors of properties to this group end up being investors in the group, whereby they are trading equity for shares in the pension fund. So I've done enough review to know that any focus on this sale is, falls under not creative financing, because this is a very good thought-out plan, but it has nothing to do with the taxation. We should be focused with the here and the now, or the 2018 here and now. So that's my rebuttal.
Okay.
Questions?
Yeah, I do have some questions. So, in regards to this discounted cash flow analysis, they did indicate that there was a appraisal. Are you suggesting that the appraisal would have been done in this format for that appraisal?
I have to think very clearly what I can say and what I can't
Sure.
say. It's my understanding, and I wasn't personally involved, but it's my understanding that all valuations done on this site were on the basis of fitting the investment value.
Okay.
The 20-year window.
And would you agree that some of this discounted cash flow analysis involves forecasting future issues that the property may, not necessarily things that are relevant to today's valuation date or?
And that's the crux of the whole problem, exactly. Not only that, but the purchase was based on that same forecasting. And an interesting example is you're not going to get mortgage financing on the original purchase if you're going to show them the balance sheet from the beginning. But by the 10th year, you've got the property healthy, and at that point, then you take out the mortgage, which is a huge cash flow bump. That's why they're raising funding for this, is because it's private equity in the beginning, and converting to secured financing afterwards.
Okay. So the 1.7 million that's used for the sworn value, where would that have come from?
I can't speak for certain. All I know is that some of the transactions that I've looked at are a combination of cash flow from investors and return of shares to the vendor.
And are they allowed to use, what value are they supposed to use when they're registering with land titles?
Well,
is it supposed to be a
no.
speculative value? Is it supposed to be?
No, it's the value to their best of their knowledge and ability, and if there's a paper trail in the investment value, they have to deal with that. They don't have Securities Commission rules to deal with as a private funding outfit, but there is the risk down the road. So if there is a transaction and on this basis, there's a contemplation in the future that they could be covered under Securities Commission. So let's just say that the allocations based here were entirely secondary. Secondary is not even secondary. They're like in 10th place based on the investment plan.
Right. But they do, in order to comply with the Tax Administration and Miscellaneous Taxes Act in regards to the land transfer tax, they do have to put a sworn value based on the fair market value.
Put a sworn value. Well, no, because it's not the requirement, so-called fair market value of land titles is not the same one that we deal with. It's not the fee simple value, market value of the fee simple interest necessarily. The definition they use of fair market value actually doesn't exist.
Okay.
It's nebulous enough to provide a broad range. Do you know that land titles, in many cases, will take the assessment as a sworn value? And so the concept of relying on land titles is, I can't think of a single tribunal that would say that that's a good indication of actual value.
Okay.
Evaluation can be done for 10 different reasons, and that's what we have to focus on. And let's use the same definition, which is
Yeah, but they're
market value of the fee simple for ad valorem assessment.
That's the intent of trying to
That's-
establish a value today,
That's
absolutely.
different than the so-called fair market value for registering a title.
They do have a definition, though, in the Tax Administration and Miscellaneous Taxes Act in regards to fair market value.
Yes, but
It may differ from the.
one of us at this table has had to prepare evaluations for land titles, and I have done a great deal of it, and their rules are different.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
Have you done it well?
Well, it's a job that's not fun because the registrar always rejects the first draft, because I guess they just like to see us work.
Ms. Rempel, questions?
Yes, I'm wondering, thank you for your presentation. In terms of the presentation you made about investment value and so on, are you indicating that the appellant is looking for an investment of all of the properties that you're appealing here today?
Well, what
Or
I'm
just this particular?
No, there's, I think, 6 here that are in the same purchase, and it would refer to those ones as they come up, we'll mention it. And that the particular definition that the sale would have been done under is investment value. Now, some of the words used for determining market value are more flowery. You have anything involving creative financing, for example, it's not market value, and an investment value is creative financing. If you have payment that's not in cash, is not allowed. And I think you've heard my comments on the payments not in cash is not allowed. The issue here is that if you're going to discuss the sale, you should come armed to this hearing with enough proof to say that it should be considered, not the obverse, not the reverse. Like, this isn't, if there's doubt, any doubt whatsoever, it can't be used. So you have to satisfy someone beyond reasonable doubt that it belongs. And of course, the assessment department is actually admitting that we haven't got to that level, and I'm just reinforcing that consideration. In previous appeals of these properties, both last cycle and this cycle, there has been 100% consensus that, you know what, the assessment department's done it on the income approach, let's look at that. And that's all I'm asking.
Okay, now, may I ask, is this particular property here at 276 Marion, is this part of the portfolio where the applicant is hoping to increase the property value? And if it is, then why do they indicate that they don't have really any plans to improve the condition of the building or to sell anything off or to
Condition.
demolish anything or whatever?
Correct, but the condition. The idea is to
The
convert.
condition which is fair.
Convert the leases from semi-gross to net and look at increasing the rental rates, which is not a condition issue, it's a revenue issue. So yes, that was their plan. I mean, the person behind this is Dawn White. I don't know if you've ever met Dawn. Dawn's in her office. Dawn is a very good investment broker at Colliers. And he identified opportunities, and his thinking on opportunities wasn't, it's not an opportunity to buy this. He's thinking in 10 years, this will be a phenomenal investment, and that's my window.
Is it 10 years or is it 20 years?
Well, beginning, it's 10 and 10. 10 years building, 10 years reaping the rewards.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, are you saying then that over time, the investor wants to divest himself of the costs, utilities, that sort of thing,
Right.
put it onto the individual tenants, but then you said also raise the rents?
Correct.
A
A two-step process.
two-step process.
Move to nets, then raise the rents. So the, and the
But
way-
wouldn't that happen at the same time? Like,
No, well, as, we're all probably familiar with renovation schemes in multifamily. And what you can do is, because each lease on a multifamily is only 1 year, your time frame for turnaround is 1 year. And then you maybe have some absorption afterwards. Because commercial is bound by 5-year leases typically, you now have the 5-year window. And so the goal is, when you have a renewal, first you switch them on that renewal to a net lease. In the net lease, then you put in step-ups. And if it's a longer-term lease, you know, the first year, 2 years will be at the same rate, and then you start to have nominal increases. So that's why you need a 10-year window to do this, to make it happen.
I see. Okay. That's all my questions. All right, so if that takes care of the rebuttal. Then your evidence, please.
Thank you. So this is fairly simple because we are looking at a point in time, not 10 years in the future. If somewhere during this 10-year build-up time, the property were to be sold, this is what it should get based on its income at the time, point in time. Going back to the Municipal Assessment Act, it's not a looking forward principle. It's point in time with support from the past. And therein lies the theoretical difference that we're facing here today versus the sale. And so you look at your proven performance. Now this amount will gradually increase. I suspect 2 years or 4 years from now, we're going to get to the point where the revenues will continue to grow well past the sale price, and the assessor can get us then. Until that happens, we're bound by legislation which says April 1st, 2018, only look backwards. So our statement for that previous year is a partial statement which coincides with the period of ownership by the new group. And that income on a semi-gross basis, we accept fully all of the costs that are involved in here. And I'll explain why when I get to that line item, but that's 81.6. On a full year basis, we've extrapolated to 97.9, and that's just a simple math calculation on adding in an additional 2 months of income. The net number is 97,929. Now that differs slightly from the model. Now, the thing about the model is the number we're using here would compare to their number of effective gross income, 111,771. That compares to what we have at 97.9. Now, what I said about as the years progress, it'll get closer and closer. In 2018, which is post-reference, that number hit 110, which is getting closer to the city's model, and tells you that the plan is working. But again, we're looking at a point in time with only historical information. So it's going to be better in 2 years from now. And Mark can put that down for 2 years from now. It's going to be better, perform better than the market. So 97.9, and then you still have to put in vacancy. With the city's change in their fresh look, we've just decided that we're just going to look at how the market really treats this. We're going to have to look at everything separately. In this case, our vacancy rate is actually lower than the assessors. That's because we use the Johnson report, which the city subscribes to. There are approximately 800 records of retail revenue properties that are tracked by Mr. Johnson in here, pages and pages, broken down by sub-areas, showing exact areas that are available for lease, what the asking rates are. Now, St. Boniface is a good market. It's historically performed very well. In the 10-year history, at one point it was a 6.2, but generally it's been between 1.3 and 3.5%. In 17, that number was 2.3%. We averaged that out with the city overall rate at 5.2, just to ensure that the sample size in the St. Boniface market is smaller, and we still have to look at the citywide. We come up with 3.8. So our vacancy and our shortfall should be less. Non-recoverables, in this case, we're not getting on our soapbox and requesting non-recoverables because we're using a gross lease. They're already built into it. So it has been taken into account. You could simply take a line item from the income, from the expense side and subtract it and put it in here to make it look good. Theoretically, there's nothing particularly wrong with the city model on dropping those non-recoverables if they showed you how they compensated it by having lower rents and higher caps, because that's the way the math works. That's what we're doing when we see a semi-gross lease, is the lease takes, the statement takes care of everything. Structural reserve side is basically our allowance for roof replacement, and if you took 25 cents a foot over 25 years, expected life of a roof, you would come up with about $20 a square foot, which buys you a new roof. And that's the math, it's simple. On the shortfall side, some of these numbers have been a little suspect as we've gone through them, but we try to calculate the actual tax, utilities, and repair and maintenance. In this case, the repair and maintenance claimed in the subject site was a little higher, but that's because of its condition being fair. They are spending a little bit more money on just upkeep. But it's a very small influence on value on the shortfall difference. Our NOI then is 88,630, and that then compares to the city at 106. So on actual income, big difference. Cap rate side, there's some positives and some negatives. On the quantitative analysis, which is page 1, is we start with a prime rate, an optimal rate of 7.5, which is our average and our strip rates in our Colliers model, and then look at the deficiencies. And the site, by the way, doesn't meet the standards of the Colliers model, but we use it as a starting point because it just means that it's going to go higher than the model, not lower. One of the major issues is the parking. Code calls for 250, one stall per 250 square feet of the gross area, which requires 40 stalls. We counted 23. Now, I appreciate the assessor's comments, but the bottom line is it's going by occupancy permit, not by building permit. So when there is a change in use, there will be a requirement to comply with it. What that means is that some of the sites might have to be office, which is one stall per 1,000 square feet, or there's another category, one stall per 550 square feet. I forgot what the category was, but those are the common categories. And what it means is that in the marketplace, you've got limitations as to who you can rent to. If you have a good retail user who's going to give you better returns and you don't have the parking, you're not going to get them. Now, forget about the bylaw. It's just common sense. If you don't have enough parking, you're not going to get the prime tenants that you want who need the parking. And how many times do any of us go to some place to shop and you go, I can't find parking, I'm leaving. Go somewhere else. And unless it's Costco, where you just wait for a spot, you're going somewhere else. And that's what's bad about it. The age, of course, is a factor. Now, the only thing in here that I will make a comment on here is the income growth potential. It's good. And the question could be, well, if you say that it's down the road, shouldn't you factor that in today's valuation? And I think that's a fair question. So, in the office, when we reviewed it, we think that a slight adjustment to the cap rate should be considered at 8%, because there is an upside here. And there's a downside and an upside on the income growth potential. The downside is that it's never going to attract a good national covenant, but the upside is there's a good plan for revenue growth and it's working. So 88,630 at 8% is 1,107,875, rounded to 1,108,000, which incidentally is an increase over last year. On the Quantitative side,
Sorry, before you go any further, 1,108,000
right,
at, did you say 8%?
8%.
At 8%.
yeah.
And that is your preference at this point?
That is the office's preference. We,
So like, what are we considering here?
yes, we would request that. Thank you very much.
Okay.
We're reviewing our accreditation standards for the Appraisal Institute, and as I am an accredited appraiser, me presenting an opinion of value, I have to ask you the question, is this an informal opinion or a formal opinion? I'm waiting for clarification of that. If it's an informal opinion, I can make it. If it's a formal opinion, the office makes it. And I'm not playing with semantics, the office did make it. Sorry about that, but anyway, page 25 is our prime rates for Colliers. And you've heard my story before about how Colliers does his rates, and the assessor was correct. People calculate them in different ways, and we calculate them, the sales department calculates them. When assessors and appraisers get them, there have to be some adjustments. So our real rate is on strip malls between 7 and 8%. The standards we use are on page 23. And in order to be considered, top of page, right side of 23, food anchored strip, 10 to 15 years old, major chain supermarket, blend of national, regional, and local tenants. And there's where we fail, and we would never meet the Colliers standard for this site. Just to clarify, Chicken Chef is not a national covenant, it's a local franchise, and it will be considered such, and so none of these other organizations are anywhere resembling. These are local strength covenants. And I'm not saying you're taxing the covenant, you're taxing the real estate's ability to attract a national tenant, which kind of goes back to that lack of parking issue. A national one's gonna come in and say, you want me to rent 5,000 feet? Now I want to make sure I have 20 parking stalls. You gotta provide it. That's the issue with this site. Comparables that we're looking at on page 30, beginning on page 35, 1799 Portage, which is being heard later today. I appraised that, I developed that cap, 7.96%. It's a frontage site, it has some parking in the back and an additional parking area behind it, limited parking, all local covenants, bowling alley in the basement. And that's where this falls. At the bottom of page 35, 819 Sargent, another strip mall with an office on the second floor. The reason it caps so high is because office on the second floor is not desirable and the neighborhood is not great. Then on page 36, the second one is 5114 Roblin, capped at 781. It did better because it had the Royal Bank as anchor tenant, and that goes back to the concept. Not only it's not for our purposes that it has the Royal Bank, but that it's capable of having the Royal Bank, and it's got a lot of parking too. So there it shows you the better cap on that basis. That's where we end up. That's my presentation.
Questions?
I do have some questions. So I'll start, I guess, with at the bottom of the front page, we show the March to December numbers.
Right,
And then we show the full year numbers.
right.
So the revenue has been bumped up, and the expenses have been bumped up. How are those calculations made? Was it, like, when I was trying to do it, I looked at,
Divide by 10, multiply by 12.
right, so you get your monthly rate and then you apply it.
Yeah,
Right,
it's
okay.
just a pure extrapolation, yeah. It could be off, and one of the reasons it could be off, especially as a semi-gross rent place, you're gonna have obviously higher heating costs in January and February, so our expenses could be higher,
Okay.
and snow clearing.
The other thing that I noticed was that on the March to December expense cell there, it says 61,284.
Right,
That looks like that comes from, on page 4 of your brief, the
Correct.
total expense at the bottom of the page there.
correct,
So that includes the non-operating expenses as well?
that's correct.
Okay, so those are below, those are indicated by the statement as non-operating costs, but yet they've been included in the calculation of the net operating income?
Anyone who's gonna buy it cares about those costs.
Okay.
And that's the definition of market value.
Okay. And then in regards to, I know you mentioned that this property wouldn't meet the criteria of the Colliers
That's correct.
model, so it would not be analyzed for the purposes of cap rate, is that what you're saying?
We wouldn't include it in our, I know for a fact that when this portfolio sold, that it never made our model,
Okay,
because of the inferior to our standards.
right.
And a lot of our standards, somebody asked me, one of your colleagues asked me the other day, how come my rates are so much higher? And I said, that's because I only appeal really bad properties. I only get about 10 a year that are good. That's the thing, it's only the good ones that go into the rate. And whereas some of the practitioners, well, we just know this for a fact, that CBRE doesn't even have a presence here. It's just guesswork from another office. And then Cushman, they get, of course, their direction from national as well, with some local input. But the national authors it.
Okay. And then in regards to the calculations for cap rates, so when Colliers is looking, I'm looking at page 24. Colliers sources these rates from investment sales. Stabilization has been done by the brokerage division, and all costs to close have been added to the purchase price, including but not limited to land transfer, title fees, brokerage fees, legal fees, expenses, etc. So the sworn value that they put in place at land titles would have an impact then on the cap rate methodology, right?
Well,
So that would be factored in through the title land transfer fees.
no, because when we do them, they come straight off an investment sheet produced by our investor group. And we have an analyst there who actually takes the transaction as dictated by the contract.
Okay,
And they take the contract as the beginning basis, and then they add in commissions, land transfer fees. It may get registered at a different value, but for our purposes, because we're doing the deal, we're doing it on the basis of the meeting of the minds. I mean, it does happen a few times when there'll be a difference at land titles, but 99% of the time it will be the same number. But again, our start source is the sales contract.
right. And what would the incentive for that person registering that sale at land titles to put a higher value than what they think the market value of that property would be?
I wouldn't use the word incentive.
Okay.
Change it.
Motivation?
Reasoning. How about reasoning?
Yeah, sure.
Because there's not a
Yeah, yeah, sure.
motivation. Well, there's different schools of thought here. In some cases, people want to see a lower value because they save some money on fees. On other cases, people think that if they show a higher value and say that there's a vendor take-back mortgage, for example, and they came to a deal, the vendor gives them a mortgage, we'll go with a higher sales price, and then I can get a greater mortgage on it and convince someone that that's the case. And I'm not saying I've ever been involved in that, but that's what happens in the world. So there is a reasoning. People think it shows higher. And this might sound stupid. It's not racist. There are certain cultures who believe that a higher transfer cost or assessment value means it's worth more. And offshore investors, and we can't persuade them otherwise, because that's the culture they were brought up in.
Okay, and then just one further question in regards to page 21 of your brief. You have Mr. Proteau's cap rate Q1 2018 table. They show a range for strip malls between 6 and 6.75.
That's the
correct?
unadjusted range.
That's the
yeah,
unadjusted
yeah.
range, and there's a comment here at the bottom on this what's trending column, the bottom paragraph. Demand for multi-tenant retail properties remains steady, expected to remain strong throughout 2018. Lack of good quality inventory retail sector has held caps steady over the past year. Cap rates for retail properties in Winnipeg are typically between 6 and 6.75, correct?
Yeah, on an unadjusted basis.
Unadjusted, right.
And
And then
remember,
which page did you say the adjusted rates are on, 25?
25, yeah. Now, on this basis, though, remember that what he's talking about here would be like premium product, like twin-anchored power centers.
Okay,
And a twin anchor means that there's two large users for the draw.
Okay.
My favorite example is the mall where we got Costco as one anchor and say Rona is the other anchor, or across the street you have Safeway and Home Depot, Walmart. So that's a triple anchor mall. And what happens with the infill small users is that they draw from the traffic to the other sites, and those are desirable investments, and there's international competition for them.
Okay.
So when you bring in outside money, for example, Ontario Teachers Pension Fund, who'll buy anything at 4%, because they only have to return 2.5% to their members and 1.5% for their fund managers. So their goals, their goal is quite low. But you do get into that competitive market of offshore and a selective low yield requirements.
Okay.
Then when you start, the more inferior the product is from that top, of course, the lack of the offshore investor, starts to impact the caps. So unlike the city, we see caps as being graduated rather than consistent.
Okay. And then there's a range in the adjusted table between 7 and 8, and you've opted to go with the high end of that range?
Well, because it doesn't belong in there, so logic would say,
Okay.
if you don't belong in there, you're gonna be at the end of the range. Even if, you're, like in this case, the motivation, the reasoning for it is, they got a good plan for revenue increase, which is on the first full year of operation, post-reference, is shown to work.
Okay. And then just an additional question in regards to the income you've applied as the actuals. Would it be fair to say that this private pension partners, they've identified this property as an investment grade property? They've
Correct.
obviously
Well,
moved to purchase because of that?
a specific type of investment.
Okay.
Right, not an international grade. They have they've identified a specific type of investor. It's no surprise that the principals in it are all in their early 50s.
Okay.
And they're thinking 10 years down the road.
Right. And then just in regards to, you made a comment earlier about, when they're looking at these buildings, they look to pick up an undervalued asset, and then, over 10 or 20 years.
Well, no. Be careful. I wouldn't say it's undervalued. One that in their investment window is going to show good growth based on straightening up the operation.
Right. So I guess what I'm
I
suggesting.
mean, what they went to when they purchased them all is they were managed internally by the last owner, and you've seen their statements. It's handwritten on a napkin. And so the first thing they do is hire a professional property manager, which is Colliers.
Right. Now, they inherit the leases that are in place, right?
Correct.
When they purchase that property. And they've identified potential for growth through the expiration of those leases and re-signing of subsequent leases. Is it possible that those leases are at a below market level? Like using the actual income to get this 985, I'm looking at the comparables that I've selected along Marion, Goulet. The rents seem a bit higher in regards to net rents, and that's where I think the difference lies in the NOIs is we're using net rents, market net rents, and you're using the actuals, and there is a difference, and that's, I think, where
That's a very good question, and I think the answer is regardless of where they could be graded, the problem is we're stuck with them by legal registration for between 5 and 7 years, and that's the problem. And even if you're dealing with restrictions on value, now in our world, appraisal world, I can tell you that ask that questions, and I'm not quoting the book, but I brought a textbook with me here, Our teaching is to look at, if you think that there's a variance between the lease fee and the fee simple on a lease, if you see an expiry in a 1-year basis, then you should take it into consideration. If it isn't, then the next standard applies, which has to consider the registrations on impacting value. If it's not going to happen in the short term, you can't use that methodology, and because you can't simply dictate that there is an additional leasehold estate in addition to the leased fee estate, you're then faced with making it happen. And you can't make it happen if our window is a year. And you saw the lease expiries.
Yep. I have no further questions.
Ms. Ripple?
Yes, I am wondering, you had been indicating that parking was a problem in
Yes.
this particular strip mall. And I am wondering how the new owners got an occupancy permit.
Oh, well, the owner doesn't take an occupancy permit, that goes to the tenant.
Okay.
So,
And they had existing occupancy permits
Correct.
related to their businesses?
yes, they all have an occupancy permit, and at some point in time, I'm making the assumption that the bylaw people reviewed this parking issue and approved it. And if you look at their current list here, Unit 5, Manitoba Choral Association may be subject to a less stringent parking requirement, and it's probably not even in our list. However, number 6, Chicken Chef, is 1 stall per 100 square feet. So actually, they need 29 stalls just for Chicken Chef.
Whereas the dry cleaners may not
The
need.
dry cleaner may be a different category, correct. And Cargo East Marine, I don't even know what that is, okay? Tattoo parlor, ain't more, I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Not that you would know, right?
Yeah.
Okay. That's under personal services, so I think that has a more lenient parking bylaw.
I'm assuming that all of these businesses got parking permits last time around.
Well, yeah, they've all got occupancy permits on the current parking load. And there are, one of the ways you can get approval is to prove you have street parking. And on Marion, I think the problem with Marion is that you're dealing with, there's an overlay zone for Provencher, and I think they were talking about a Marion overlay zone as well. What they're trying to do is return it to its former condition, which is a neighborhood, so they don't like parking lots in St. Boniface. And another way you could deal with it is if you could make arrangements to rent space next door, which they don't have right now. So-
And you indicated that the new owners have hired a property manager?
Yes.
Is the property manager just for this property, or is it?
No, for all the sites.
Okay.
Colliers is their property manager, my office, and Curtis is their property manager. And like I said, with a goal to cleaning up accounts as well, and to try to maximize, like if a lease, for example, even if it's a semi-gross lease, maybe some of the lease may call for participation in HVAC repairs, as an example, that in the past may not have been done. So at least then we go back to the lease and say, we're gonna recover on the basis of the lease, and then help on the renewals to identify what could be done. And then using our buying power as well to get better deals, you know, on services, HVAC, snow clearing, maintenance repair, that sort of thing.
And are you aware, I see that this property was sold, or heard this property was sold March 7th, 17. Were there any improvements made to the property prior to its sale to the current owners?
Just required repairs.
Okay, those are all my questions. Thank you.
You were mentioning that St. Boniface has a low vacancy rate compared with the city as a whole. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
Why is that?
There are no shopping centers in St. Boniface. So it's mostly local users, and they tend to, let me just look at the actual inventory size. That usually answers the question right away. So St. Boniface, well, here's your answer, has an inventory of 800,000 square feet. The city of Winnipeg's inventory is 22 million. So it represents a small part of the inventory. Many other sites are owner occupied and therefore not on the search. The ones that do pop up, one small one in Goulet, the largest one is in Island Shore, which is still part of the St. Boniface catchment area, but not even close to this subject property. Lagimodiere, not even close. Lakewood, not even close.
Not even close in what sense?
Geographically to
Oh,
Marion.
okay.
Here's one on Provence, a very small one, 834 square feet listed as vacant, on another one on Goulet. 2,034 square feet vacant in all of St. Boniface, as defined by the real St. Boniface area. So it's always been, but again, the users are generally owner occupants, and even the largest users aren't even listed in this, I'm just looking for the Safeway here, for example. No, Safeway's not on here, because it doesn't fit the mold.
So if that's the case, is the supply more restricted in, from additional development, more restricted in St. Boniface than elsewhere in the city?
Well, I'd have to say, yes, supply is difficult because there's no real redevelopment land unless you're talking about some of the older sites tearing them down and redoing them. There's no greenfield development, of course, because it's surrounded, it's already developed. The last development there was the office on Marion. WHA put a multi-story building on Goulet, and that's institutional. I think with land were to come up, that would probably go multifamily. It's the opposition to commercial is strong, and there's probably very few neighborhoods that have as much C1 land as St. Boniface. The other place where you'd see a lot of C1 would be Sargent and Ellis. So that's another issue, is that you can't really do anything on C1 except have local services.
In your Collier's report, you pointed out that the strip definition there is a higher level than what we're looking at here. I'm just curious, why does Collier's not look at a lower level and provide cap rates on those as well? Obviously, that category just isn't this one at all. You know, like anchored by a grocery store, major restaurant
Right.
chain. You know, that's not what we're talking about. And yet, strips like this one are a dime a dozen in Canada.
Correct. The observation is correct, and the answer to the question is that there's more money made on commissions than the larger ones. Well, that's the honest answer. The market segment that represents the smaller strip mall is broader, and you'll find residential agents moving into this category as well. And large firms, Collier, CBRE, Cushman, we'll obviously list them if we get them, but generally the mandate of our organization is to get involved in more investment grade properties.
Okay.
And we do track them, but we do sell them, but I think that the tracking becomes problematic because the caps I've provided you were deals we did. They never made the study because we don't want to show an investor that there's a 12% cap somewhere. It doesn't give you confidence that we can sell our property and get a good return. It is a sales brochure.
And when you were looking at your pages 35, 36, I caught up to you at the time that you were talking about 5114 Roblin. You had mentioned another one as well on page 35. Which one was that you were highlighting?
1799 Portage.
Okay. Your rents, the rent $985, You have your list of comparable rents on page 6. Is $9.85 the average of these, or?
No, this
or is
was
it-
the actual rent that is
Actual?
generated on the site, and the comparables, we can discuss them and look at them. Again, I'm getting back to the problem of in our mind, that there's a line you don't cross on looking at what's available in the market. And if you got an expiry coming within a year, then you start thinking that we think we can get more for it. But remember the act as well, we're not allowed to look forward, we're only looking back. There's good support here. There's some on St. Anne's, not on our list today, 88 St. Anne's. It's another strip mall we manage. It's been on the market, trying to get tenants in there for years, achieving $7 to $9. Another one we represent is 156 to 160 St. Anne's, so it's got 2 restaurants in there getting good rents, but then the Piston Ring's only getting $9.67. 741 St. Mary's at the bottom is a typo, that's a gross rent, sorry, our mistake. I just reviewed it the other day.
Okay. You were saying that, this property having a non-conforming use status because of the insufficient parking. Do you know when the city prepares its model figures, is it throwing into the hopper properties with non-conforming uses as well as conforming uses? Is it representative of everything or not? Do
We
you
don't know the answer to that, because as you all know, the model is a mystery to everybody, even
Okay.
the assessor.
Then I'll ask the assessor if he knows.
Yeah, they would use properties that have legal non-conforming use, for sure, as part of our analysis.
My side of that answer is, of course, for years we're asking, can we actually look at the model, and we never see it. But it's not just the concept of being a legal non-conforming use. It's I'm getting at the point here, it's the ability to attract a good user that is at stake. You can't get the Royal Bank, you can't get an international chain of any sort, because they're gonna walk
But
in.
that would bump it into that higher strict category that you're saying this entity isn't.
It isn't, and because you can't walk in and force you on the typical lease on these operations is, I was just reading a Bank of Nova Scotia lease the other day, guaranteed parking spot requirement. They're not stupid, they know that's what they need. And so they're not going to a site that won't have the ability to grant them that, and therefore, that's what drops its category in the marketplace.
So then as a general rule, what's the impact on cap rates? Are you getting a higher or lower cap rate for a smaller time strip mall like this compared with the one that is anchored by a
Right.
grocery chain?
You're getting a higher cap, and part of the reason is the weight put to the covenant. And obviously, if you have a solid corporation that's very profitable, the covenant is better than if you were leasing to a tattoo parlor.
Because they might disappear
Right.
tomorrow or something like that?
And they can be behind in the rent,
Okay.
yeah.
But what's the implication of the National Bank, their ability to twist you as the owner to get a lower rent than the tattoo parlor can?
Sure, but then you're gonna cap, they have that ability, but they don't exercise it. What they exercise on is, I'll pay what you want, but you gotta give me what I want.
Hmm.
And I want parking, I want my access here, if I want an ATM, it's going here. That's their clout. We have a strip mall, and maybe it's coming in the next couple of days, where there's a Bank of Montreal and they use their clout, not for better rent, but to force the landlord to give them an ATM. And make sure their amenities are met, their requirements are met, because they're making their decisions not so much based on saving money on rent, but on hitting what they think is the proper client service.
Okay, that's all my questions. Summary, any need for summary? Mr. Neufeld?
No,
Nope.
fine.
All right. That takes care of 276 Marion. I assume that some of our discussion will apply
Correct.
to following properties. Consequently, they may go just a little faster. Does anybody want a 5-minute break at this point?
I'm good.
Okay,
I will at one point.
okay. Well, then why don't we do it now, because I'd just like to grab a water, so let's just,
Okay.
5 minutes and... All right, we will resume with 797 McLeod Avenue. Mr. Assessor.
File number 19-4726, roll number 0400280900. The address is 797 McLeod Avenue. The roll year under appeal 2020 with an April 1st, 2018 reference date. The assessed value under appeal $772,000, class code 60 and taxable. We have 1 building, 3 premises. Actual year built of 1985 with no effective age applied to the subject property. Leasable area on file for this property, 3,376 square feet. If you flip to page 2, you'll see that the owner has responded to all of our requests for income information, including the sales mailer. And you'll see that it also transacted as part of that portfolio sale March 7th, 2017 for $750,000. If you flip to page 3, you'll see the rental comparables that I've used for this particular property. They range in regards to the net rents per square foot between $12 a square foot as high as $26 a square foot. If you flip to page 4 of the brief, you'll see the income workup as produced by the model. So we have, again, 3,376 square feet. Net rents between the 3 premises varying between $13.08 to $14.50 for a potential rent of $46,562. Vacancy loss at 4%, non-recoverable expense ratio at 2%, and shortfall at $7 a square foot for a net operating income of $42,861. The cap rate applied by the model here is 5.55%. for a capitalized and rounded value at $772,000. Page 5 again is just a summary of the income workup. Page 6, and let me know if the pages don't match for you guys. The map view showing the parcel location. It's an interior lot on McLeod Avenue. Page 7, you'll see some aerial photos of the subject property showing the building itself as well as the parking area that fronts on McLeod. And page 8, you'll see the street view photos of the subject property, again just showing the building and the parking area. If you flip to page 9 through page 12, you'll see that the income and expense questionnaires have been returned blank, but again, in this instance, they've opted to send us a commercial rent roll with the income statement. Again, in this instance, because of the purchase date, they only have 10 months of data here, so keep that in mind. Page 14 and 15 are the annual statement for that 10 months. Just a quick look at this. I'm not seeing anything that I would suggest needs to be removed. Page 16 is the property sale questionnaire. Again, I'll just point out the consideration paid and the sworn value. The same things apply. They're not aware of the consideration paid. It's arm's length transaction, real estate included in the purchase price, no, etc. We've kind of covered this. They do comment on the condition at the bottom, fair. Page 18, again, is our cap rate table. And again, we'd be looking at between the 20th and 80th percentile at a range between 6.40 and 7.05. And as low as 5.4 and as high as 8.65 for the overall range. So this one does appear on the lower side. Page 19 is some excerpts from the Municipal Assessment Act. And page 20 through to the back of the brief is the standard addenda package that we attach to the brief. That's my presentation for this property. I'm open to any questions.
Mr. Newfeld.
Page 4 and 5, this is all valued by the model.
Correct.
Well, yesterday somebody told me something that in the retail world, sites below 5,000 square feet are applied at 5.55%, and then as they get larger, the cap rate increases. Is that your understanding?
Size
In
definitely.
the model.
Size definitely plays a factor. I don't have the exact thresholds with me, but yes, there is a size consideration for sure. The smaller properties would typically have a lower cap, and the large properties would typically have a higher cap.
Now, is that grounded in market observations, market practices? Or is this just somebody's theory?
I can't speak to the modeling methodology. I'm not certain as to how that decision was made.
The rest of the questions are the same as the last time. I'm assumed asked and answered.
Okay. Ms. Rempel?
I don't think I have any questions at this stage, thank you.
Okay. Your photos, and by the way, if you can do it, dating the photos is always helpful. So this property is almost at the corner of McLeod and Gateway. And the corner lot there kind of looks like perhaps it was recently cleared. Do you know what, have you been out there? Is there something there now? Any impact of that neighboring lot on this lot?
I couldn't tell you. I have driven by this particular strip mall. As to paying attention to what was going on the corner lot there, I couldn't really say. As far as I'm aware, I don't think there's anything, but I could be mistaken, so I don't want to say with full certainty.
Okay. Going back to Mr. Newfeld's question about the cap, is it axiomatic that a smaller property has less risk than as you get bigger and bigger? Small property has fewer tenants, one disappears, a third of your property is now vacant, that sort of thing. Who you can attract is no doubt affected by who is around you, that sort of thing. So how is it that something like this generates a significantly lower cap rate than the last property we looked at?
I'm not really too certain on a definitive answer for you. Again, there's many things that go into the cap rate in the model. The age of the property, the size of the property, the location of the property, all of those things have an influence on the cap. As to how the model specifically arrived at 5.55, which is lower than the previous cap we looked at, I'm not really, I'm sure it's a combination of all those things.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you're looking to locate in a strip mall in Winnipeg, how likely are you to wind up in one built in 1985? Was the 80s a heyday for strip malls in Winnipeg? Or does that mean you're in a rare, really old one? Or is that really good in Winnipeg because nothing's been built since then? Can you give me a bit of that sense?
I think that there is quite a bit of inventory from the 80s in regards to strip malls. Number-wise, I couldn't tell you percentage. I've definitely seen some older strip malls in the city. Yeah, strip malls were popular in the 70s and 80s for sure.
That's all my questions. Mr. Newbold?
Again, this is the same ownership group, so the comments are the same. There are 3 tenants in there, and I was going to say that a smaller place has a higher risk, but for reasons of losing one tenancy is 30% of your income. These are all local users, again, a mix of, actually, appears to me that they're all semi-gross leases. We did the same methodology, which was taking the 10 months and extrapolating to 12 months. And in this case, our check on it was to compare the actual 2018 number, which is post-reference, just to see if our prediction was correct, and it's within $2,000 in the NOI. So that's acceptable. Sorry, on the statement side, before application of vacancy risk. There is, in my mind, a concern on our vacancy rate, and that has to do with the sample size in East EK, which is fairly small, and I wouldn't rely on it for. There are only 27 retail properties in this sample area, and so it's a rather small sampling, and it's impacted by 2 shopping centers on Henderson. I think we had used a blend of retail, of city retail and East Kildonan retail, so I think the sample size isn't strong enough. So I have a modification on the vacancy, just to revert it to the city vacancy rate, because that's more reliable for our purposes. And I'm going to give you a change in the total NOI to, so you don't, because that's all I've roughed out. I've changed the vacancy rate from 6.5 to 5, and that's resulted in lower vacancy costs and lower shortfall costs, higher NOI, which is now $42,116.
Sorry, can I interject quickly? The vacancy, you're using ours? Ours is at 4.
No, 5.
You want 5? Okay,
5,
yeah.
Ooh, I could have gone for 4, but yeah, it's not a major factor.
I thought he was going there.
I'd be okay with 4 too, but I've already worked out 5.
Okay. I just wanted to be clear.
42,116, and I'm glad I had that slight pause, because I told you before, Mark asked a really good question, which was, if it's underperforming, are we supposed to use those rents? And I only answered half the question. The first part of the question was, if it's expiry that's more than a year away, if you're stuck with the existing rents. But rents and caps don't exist in isolation. If you have a property that's underperforming in rent, and you know it's going to get better, or you predict it's going to go better, you can put a lower cap on it, because there's going to be income coming down the road. That was the right answer to that question. Now, in the last property, I adjusted my cap as a result, and I think it's appropriate to also adjust the cap on that basis as well. So this is, normally would be about 8.5%. This is a really poor example of a strip mall, just on the size issue. Adjusting it to 8% on the revised NOI is a value of $526,450, rounded to $526,000.
At what cap?
8%, which answers the question of the rent performance. Now, the difference here, of course, is the size is bad, and you'll see that in our quantitative analysis that we took three whole basis points off for the size, because the lack of flexibility. I mean, a strip mall optimally should be 10,000 square foot minimum. We have 7 to 8 potential CRUs, which means you can put them together, or you can have them separate. 3 is too small. Thank you, that's my presentation.
Mr. Bellatulio?
I have no questions. I think I understand what the revisions were.
Okay. Ms. Rempel?
I have no questions, thank you.
Okay. So, Mr. Newfield, is it your contention that all of the properties in this portfolio of purchase were all underperforming, and that is why they were purchased?
No, you see, I wouldn't say underperforming so much as to say that a long-term upside was observed, not a short-time upside. There's a couple of different types of property investors, and there's some who are looking for stable income, don't want to be bothered. There's some who are looking for the quick turnaround. There's some who are willing to go for the long turnaround, and this would be a long turnaround issue. The quick turnaround guy would see something he could fix within a year. Underperforming, where you're locked in for this amount of time, is not called underperforming anymore. It's a reclamation project. I have to say that when Don first explained his concept to me, I had to think about it an awful lot, and where he was going with this. And after thinking about it, you always just have to bear in mind, 10 years. I'm doing a 10-year investment, and then when it happens, that's when I'm going to make my money. So I don't think underperforming is necessarily the right word.
And would every one of these potential buyers that we have to have in our mind be thinking the same way and
No.
consequently offer the same money?
No, because this is a unique project. I've never seen anything like this. Most of the people, when they're in and underperforming, are turnaround artists, where it's get in, get it changed, get out, and or get it changed real quickly, slap a mortgage on it, and forget about it, and just let it perform for you. So this is it's an uncharted, unnamed category style of investing.
But if there's substantial opportunity here, this was recognized as substantial opportunity.
Yeah.
Presumably, the average buyer of commercial space would recognize this. Where then is the risk in this property? Why is the cap rate that high?
The risk is patience and continued corrections. You got to worry about this for 10 years while you're making it better, and most people don't have that attention span, for one. And when someone says, what are the skills an investor has, I say, well, they don't have skill, they have greed and timing. So this site possesses none of those characteristics. The timing is way off, and you're obviously not in a get-rich-quick scheme here. So that's why I'm saying that this is different in the marketplace than anything I've ever seen. I hate to bring in anything regarding age, but for example, I would look at this and say, yeah, am I going to live that long if I were to invest in it? Not interested, right? Everyone's got it appeals to a certain very narrow range of investors.
Is this property being substantially smaller than the previous one, a better or a worse risk?
This is a worse risk, and again, as being part of the portfolio, it was, on the opportunity of picking and choosing what you want, this wouldn't have been included if it hadn't been required. They have another site on Henderson. We're not dealing with that today, no. And again, a really bad site they didn't want to have, but take it with it or don't get it, the whole package.
Do you know who owns that vacant site beside this property?
Yeah, that, I believe, last I knew, it was Wally Dick, and it was a Husky and a Max Milk site, I believe, wasn't it? Wally rented it to them.
And that's been wiped out?
I don't know, I mean, I
Is
used
this
to-
photo really, really old?
Yeah, I don't know, 'cause, last time I spoke to Wally was about a year ago, so I'm not up to date on, but Max was always responsible for everything on there. They owe me money, by the way,
How old would have that Max milk have been?
I don't know, last time I dealt with it was 2010.
Oh. Anyway, all right, I guess we won't know. That's all my questions? Summary? Any need for summary? No summary. Okay, then we can move on. Next one on the list, 764 Keewatin Street and 210 Tyndall Avenue. Keewatin and Tyndall. So my docket here says 764 Keewatin. This sheet says 764 Keewatin and 210 Tyndall?
Yeah, that's the owner's name.
Yeah, that's right. That's the ownership.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Wow. That's a strange name, though. I mean, it sure looks like an address, doesn't it? Sorry, I didn't look down far enough.
Parents are naming their kids really strange things these days.
You'd think by now I would know where to find the address. 764 Keewatin, Mr. Colatruvia.
File number 19-4721, the roll number 1409-750-5400. The address is 764 Keewatin Street. The roll year 2020 with an April 1st, 2018 reference date. The assessed value under appeal, $1,156,000, class code 60 and taxable. We have 2 buildings on file for this property, 5 premises. Actual year built ranging between 1978 and 1980. Total leasable area on file for this property, 5,542 square feet. If you flip to page 2 of the brief, you'll see that the owner has responded to both of our requests for income information, including the sales questionnaire. Again, it's part of this portfolio sale transacting on March 7th of 2017 for $1,050,000. At the bottom of page 2, you'll see the subject property leases that we have on file for this property. They range in regards to a net rent per square foot between $9.71 all the way up to $21.25 net rent per square foot. If you flip to page 3 of the brief, you'll see the rental comparables that I've used for this property. There is a range in regards to the net rent per square foot for these comparables between $11.52 upwards of $15. If you flip to page 4, you'll see the income workup as produced by the model. The rental range there is between $12.73 up to $15.71. The total potential rent there, $82,100, vacancy at 4%, and non-recoverable expense allowance at 2%, shortfall at $7 a square foot for a net operating income of $75,688. The cap rate here is 6.55%. For a capitalized and rounded value at $1,156,000. Page 5 is just a summary of that income workup. Page 6 is the map view showing the subject parcel. This is located on the corner of Keewatin Street and Tyndall Avenue. It's a corner lot. And it's 2 buildings as shown here. One appears to be the bakery, and then the remainder of the premises attached to the strip there. So you can see some additional photos on page 7, just showing the arrangement of the subject parcel, the parking areas, and the building locations. And page 8 is street view from Google. At the time that they drove by, it looks like they were doing an exterior refresh. I believe all that work has been completed at this point. As to when that was done, I can't say exactly. If you look at page 9, you'll see the income and expense questionnaire. Again, they've left it blank, instead opting for the rent roll and the annual statement, which can be found on page 12, and the annual statement 13 and 14. And again, it's just 10 months of data, so keep that in mind when you're looking at this stuff. Just a quick look at the annual statement to see if there's anything that I would caution against including, and everything looks to be fairly standard. I wouldn't really say anything needs to be removed from that. So page 15, again, this falls under the strip mall category, so we're looking between the 20th percentile at 6.4% and 7.05 at the 80th percentile. Page 16 is some excerpts from the Municipal Assessment Act, and page 17 through to the back of the brief is the standard city addenda package. That is my presentation for this property. I'm open to any questions.
Mr. Dufa?
Page 4 and 5, valuation all done by the model.
I believe so, yes.
Earlier, I'd asked you a question about the dividing line on your cap rate side. This one is above 5,000 square feet. Is that why the cap is now 6.55 or 1 whole point higher?
It may be, yep.
Okay. On page 14, which is the statement provided by the owner, I'm looking at the fourth item entry, vandalism repairs.
Which page is that, 13?
14.
14. No, vandalism
Vandalism
repairs.
repairs.
$430?
Yeah, you see that much in statements?
No, not really. I mean, that's typically would fall under repair and maintenance, right? They've lumped it in there. I think it's
Unless
okay.
it happens so much that they've got to characterize it. Okay, so the other questions on the other properties are the same, and I'm assuming asked and answered. Thank you. That's it.
Ms. Ripple?
Yes, I am wondering, you indicated that you thought that there was an exterior refresh. Did you say that you had done a drive-by or
So
inspected?
yeah, for this property, I have not inspected, but from what I could see, it did appear that, like, so the certain angles that you see on Google, they don't always drive down the streets every year.
Yeah.
So to get the shot that I wanted from Tyndall Avenue was the older date, where the renovations were still done. There was, if you look at the bottom of page 8, the street view photo there, you
Right.
can see that the refresh is done there. So the top two show that there's some wood up at the top.
Right.
And then if you look at page 8 from the corner on Keewatin, where the newer photo exists, you can see that the work was completed at that point.
Are you aware of any building permits having been taken out?
I think I did look at building permits to speak to exactly what was there. I mean, typically for this type of thing, you'd see an exterior alteration permit, but I don't have that with me or anything to speak to.
Thank you.
Is there any impact on the marketability of the property, considering that it is two separate buildings, versus if it was the same square footage in a single building? Is it better, worse, indifferent?
I can't really speak to the motivation of each tenant as to why they would prefer their own building. You may have someone who prefers to have their own space. You may have someone who prefers to have a unit within a strip just because they benefit from the exposure of the clientele of the surrounding businesses. The bakery is in the standalone building, and then the other tenants are along that strip. I'm not really, I don't really know if it would have an impact on the marketability. I mean, it might attract a certain type of tenant to have their own building, but it would be kind of speculative of me to suggest.
They've clapped, you finished speaking.
Thank you.
That's all my questions.
Thank you.
Sir, I have a follow-up question. Pictures, page 8.
Sure.
You have dates on them?
No, I don't have dates. It varies a lot on Google.
So it could have been 2 years ago?
Correct, yeah. So typically I would go with the most modern. However, like I said, on Tyndall, that was a bit dated. So I think the last drive was 2019, but again, I don't have that information with me
And
to
there's
speak.
no indication that these, whether or not these were required repairs or not?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Any indication that they improved the revenue?
Not that I'm aware of, yeah.
That's why dating the photos is actually quite important, so
Yeah.
that we know, is this representative of what's going on right now, or
Right.
not?
Yeah.
You know how to date them in Google?
No, I'll have to look into that.
When you click them, just take a broader
Possible.
thing, that will have a say at the bottom.
Yeah.
Okay, that was 764 Keewatin. Then we have 1846 Portage Avenue.
Unless you're gonna let me present.
Because you want applause?
Well, the applause doesn't mean we're all done, just that Mark was done.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
Thank you. Same as the last thing.
And my apologies.
Yes, okay. Same methodology for valuation. You'll note that on our test, we're coming up with potential income of roughly 50,000, and in 2018 it was proven that 56,000, so they're on the right track. There is a mistake in the on the vacancy rate. This is not St. James. It's actually called Garden City, which you think about Keewatin is, well, it's kind of in no man's land, but Garden City rates are actually higher, but I'm not going to adjust the rate. It was just some of our geographically challenged staff members who don't know the city that well. So we're using the same numbers now. What is interesting is because we have a small site, how much higher the costs are, and that's another disadvantage of small sites, is that if you've got to fix something and you've only got 5,000 square feet to charge it against, and it's a fixed expense, it makes expenses, you're more sensitive to expenses, especially in a site like this, which is a gross lease site, and that's putting pressure on the cap. It's a riskier investment. So that's when you talk about size of a building, it's bad. Any fixed cost is going to be more of an impact on value. And an example of a fixed cost, for example, is insurance. Insurance will be, it's usually about 18 cents a foot, roughly, but you know, the smaller the site, there's a fixed charge, and then it goes up not by an increment, not about the same amount. And that's what you're dealing with. And they had some plumbing repairs. You know, if you're doing a gross plumbing repair, so like it has to do with the main hookup, you got 20,000 feet to charge it against or 5,000 feet to charge it again. It's just bad risk levels. So again, that's the difference. With this site, like I said, everything else was done the same in the valuation. And again, in consideration of that there is an upside, we're going to change the cap again to 8%. Which a value of 511,850. Rounded to 512,000. Now I know that's lower than the value last year. I think what we're seeing here is the problems with appraising and assessing small properties. Small changes in costs and expenses produce dramatic changes in value. So not only does that indicate a lower value now, it also indicates a higher risk for a smaller property than a larger property, which completely flies against the model. But that's the difference between the market and the model. Thank you.
Mr. Pellegrino.
So if you're looking at the rent roll, I don't know if you show that in your brief.
I've got it, but I think you had it in there too.
Yeah, I have it on page 12 if you need it.
All right.
Can you point out which of these leases are net rents?
I believe that none of them are net. I think the closest might be the distilled water. You'll notice that their recoveries are a total of $9.45 a square foot, and the rest are well under that. The expenses are are about $10 a square foot, so that one is close to it.
Okay. And you use 889, which is based on the actuals. I understand the methodology you're
Right.
using. But it does appear that within the units A through D, within that strip portion of it, that there is quite a bit of variation in the rents. Can you speak to that at
Yes,
all?
the ones that have face rents in the 20s, of course, are having recoveries of about between $2 and $3. So we have costs at 10, so the net would be about $13. And then with Diamond, Unit C, the net is gonna be about 14, but the restaurant is the very badly performing one, because the net on that is 7. And then the net on the bakery is $3.
And you're taking the expense, the recoveries on the right-hand column?
Right, I'm just looking at the overall costs, which are $10, and subtracting what they're recovering, and then taking the difference and subtracting it from the net. So, I mean, you're correct, there's a really wide variance of rents on the site.
Okay. No further questions.
Ms. Ripple?
Yes, I am looking at the list of leases that were provided to us by the city, and I'm assuming that all those same tenants are still there. Am I correct or am I wrong? Because I see a couple of the leases.
Yeah, I see two of the ones that are up, the bakery and Unit C have been expired. I don't have the newest information on that.
So it would seem to me, if those businesses are still in this strip mall, that the vacancy rate has been very low.
Yeah, I think by and large that was one of the attractive features of this site, was that they focused on the philosophy of being full, and this is old-fashioned landlording, where I'd rather be full than get the highest rate. So the issue here is to satisfy a greater net operating income and try to move that towards a greater net operating income. But yes, that's correct. And on that respect, the vacancy rate that we've applied, of course, is higher than it's performing. But you know, everybody's got to have a vacancy rate. You know, I'm gonna bring my little textbook along here with me. Everybody needs a vacancy rate.
But it doesn't necessarily have to be 6.4%.
No, but, okay, but what are the alternatives here is to try to find a market sampling that can prove a rate. So now another way of doing it, which falls outside of the scope of work that normally we would do, and perhaps for a more detailed analysis, I would then look at specific vacancy rates, perhaps on strips, because we do have the data. This requires a bit of work. The Garden City strip center rate, incidentally, is 7.9%, which is impacted by, well, it's averaged as low as 2.3 and as high as 8.6, so it's been up and down, indicating a small sample size. Strip center rates are generally a few points, half a point lower than the city overall. Again, if you've got 5 tenants and you lose one, your vacancy rate's 20%. And I think that's the number that we would worry about in valuation. Whereas if you have 20 units and you lost one, it's 5%. And in my mind, that would indicate a lower vacancy risk.
I also have one other question. I thank you for that response, and it's with regards to the $512,000 you think is the estimated value of the property. And I am wondering if I've got that right. I think that's what you said.
Yes.
Why you would think 512 was a fair estimated value when the owners paid over $1 million for this property March 7th, 2017.
Well, they didn't pay $1 million for it. That's the point we were trying to make earlier. The actual amount of cash changing hands is not known. That's why we answered not sure. That's what was registered at titles.
Okay, that's all my questions, thank you.
I'm confused by the rents. We have the rent roll, so those are the actuals. Are those gross or are those net?
They're semi-gross.
They're semi-gross, whereas the city
Okay, you know what?
has listed them as net. So, which are they?
Well, numbers don't lie. Go to the statement. That's all. You add up the income that it's generating, which in this case is, $80,000 roughly in income. That's what,
Coming from,
well,
Sorry,
sorry,
I'm
that
looking-
was just from the rent number. You know, I gotta say, I just found something here that is a slightly different number. I'm sure. Sorry, am I looking at your brief? Yeah, you got your, what rent roll is page 12? Yeah.
Somebody's having a good time out there.
sound like City Hall to me.
This is actually in last year's brief. That there's an inconsistency here on the rent for the bakery. By look what this rent was. I'm just showing you this.
Yep.
And now they have it listed here at, when you add it up, it's much lower. Okay, I think in all fairness, we have to consider, I have to reconsider this number.
Do you want a few minutes?
Yeah, well, I have an old statement where it shows, and I'll tell you the number, the annual income, gross income on the first one was 31,500, and the annual income that they're declaring here is 25,594. And remember when I said, well, the net rent works out to about $3 or $4? Well, that's why it's not. This may have been a period of I don't know. The net income should be about $6,000 higher. So on that basis, I'm just going to use a number of, and because it's about, everything's going to be rounded because it's not accurate, but there's enough to indicate that there's an error here. So our net income should be about $47,000. Which turns into a value of, at 8%, of $587,500, rounded to $588. And that's a very informal number, but
Do you have a sense then of how much your net rent has changed?
sorry, it's even the wrong number. Now I have a newer statement here, that number's higher.
I'm gonna run out of room here to make my corrections.
Oh, no, sorry, it's the right number, it's the right number. How much my net would change as a result? Well, you would add roughly, I just went right to the top line, so that would mean a net income of, call it $56,000. $9 a foot, because I'm rounding, that's why it's exactly that. No, that's not right, sorry. 56,000, someone's been messing with my decimal points here. $10 a foot, $9.95 actually.
And that yields the 588,000.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
So that would, the top number becomes 56,000, and because this is gonna affect recoveries as well, because it's a greater income, I put it right on the bottom line to increase it from 40,900 to 47,000, again, using an estimate, because there is an error here. That coincides with previous year's statements. So it just looks to me, that's the funniest least cause I've ever seen.
Okay?
Yeah.
We're good?
Thank you, I'm sorry for that.
It's okay. I'm still confused.
Good.
So maybe, Mr. Colatrugio, on your page 2, you have a column called net rent.
Look at that statement there. The last one. You ever seen that? No.
Just showing the funny thing in the lease.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about on page 2, where it's showing as net rent.
Right?
When I'm reviewing it, it doesn't look like they're net rents. They look semi-gross. And you can tell just by the recoveries aren't the full recovery of the total operating costs. So to me, that looks like an error. I don't think it'd be fair to classify those as net rents.
Are you on the same page as Mr. Newfold when it comes to the rent then?
Well, so we don't look at the actuals. We use model rents.
I know, but if you looked at the actuals, would you be on the same page with him?
In regards to using $9 overall?
Nine,
No, we're at 10, we're at 10
$10 overall?
Call it $10. Whereas your models are 1454,
Yeah, so I would always just go back to my comparables. Those should be net rents, and they range between $11.52 and $15. So I think 10 may be on the low side. 12 looks like there's a lot of support. But again,
And these nets are nets.
these should be net, yeah.
All right. I think that's all my questions. Unless I'm wrong, I think we've drawn a conclusion on this one at this point. We will move to 1846 Portage in just a minute.
Sure.
Lease didn't cancel if anything happens to Marcello. I'm never.
Okay, 1846 Portage Avenue.
Start if you guys are ready.
Yes, please.
19-4480, the roll number 0702-009-1000. The address 1846 Portage Avenue, roll year 2020 with an April 1st, 2018 reference date. The assessed value under appeal, $746,000. Classification is 60 and taxable. We show 2 building records, 3 premises. Actual year built varies between 1958 and 1978. No effective ages applied to either building on this file. The total leasable area, 5,680 square feet. If you flip to page 2, you'll see that the owner has responded to both of our requests for income information. No sales history for the subject property, and the subject lease in place shows $7.56 net rent for 3,340 square feet. The rental comparables I used are shown on page 3, and they vary in regards to the net rent between $12 as high as $23.26 on Portage. And I tried to stick to similar type of retail space, selecting some on Portage and a few on Ness, as well as one on Roblin. If you look at page 4, you'll see the income workup as produced by the model. So we show, again, 5,680 square feet leasable area. The rental range between $8.79 a square foot for the larger premise and $12.63 on the high end of that range. The total potential rent there, $57,618, 4% vacancy loss, and non-recoverable expense allowance at 2%. Shortfall at $7 a square foot for a net operating income of $52,617. The overall capitalization rate, 7.05%, for a capitalized and rounded value at $746,000. Page 5 is a summary of that income workup. Page 6 shows the map view showing the subject parcel located on the corner of Portage Avenue and Roseberry Street. Again, this is a strip mall. 2 buildings, as you can see by the aerial photos on page 7. Page 8 is the street view of the subject property. And the income and expense questionnaire is shown, and this is an entry in our online portal. They indicate net rents. This is on page 9 of the brief. Looks like the rental income $25,235, and I apologize, sometimes these printouts from the webpage can be difficult to read. I'm not really sure how to interpret the annual expenses. It looks like they've lumped all of the categories under maintenance and repair for a total of $31,409, and they suggest a net operating income of negative $6,174. Page 10, you'll see the tenant verification form. Again, this is submitted on our online portal. They do show one tenant only in place here, though I'm not sure as to the current occupancy status of the building. If you look at the photos on page 8, it does appear that there was some sort of kitchen design business operating out of the other unit. Whether that's still in place, I'm not too certain, and they haven't filled that out in the questionnaire online, so I'm not too certain about it. Again, if you look at page 11, we're dealing with strip mall again, so we're looking at the 20th percentile at 6.40%, and we're in the 80th percentile for this subject property at 7.05%, so right on the high end of our range between the 20th and 80th percentile. Page 12 is some excerpts from the Municipal Assessment Act, and page 13 through to the back of the brief is the standard city addenda package. That is my presentation for this property. I'm open to any questions.
Mr. Duthall.
Page 4 and 5, is this all model?
I believe so, yes.
And the statement they provided on page 9 indicates 41% vacancy.
Sorry, page 5 you said?
9?
Page 9? Yes, on the right-hand side, it does appear that they indicate vacancy, 41%.
41%.
Yeah.
And you have calculated the income for the remaining tenant at $756 net, and that would be the same space that your model has at $879, correct?
For the current tenant, the Dalco?
Right.
Yeah, that would be the 3340 leasable area, the second premise in the list of 3 premises.
You ever heard of carbon tetrachloride or any of its derivative compounds?
No.
I used in the dry cleaning business until early 80s.
I'm not familiar with that specific chemical compound.
Does the model deal with market resistance to detrimental conditions such as that in any way?
No, I don't believe so.
Thank you, those are my questions.
Ms. Rumpel?
I'm just wondering, you indicated that Dalco Inc. was still a tenant there, and it looks like the other tenant is not there at the current time. I noticed that for Dalco Inc., their lease was up in 2017, by the looks of it. It started in 2006, and it was for 11 years.
Yeah, it looks like maybe end of year 2016.
Did you
might
do
be
any
correct.
kind of an inspection or a drive-by? of
I didn't,
this?
unfortunately, for this property.
And is there any indication of when these photos were taken?
No, again, sorry, with the Google Street View, the dates vary a lot.
Okay, okay, thank you, that's all my questions.
Is Delco a dry cleaner?
I'm not certain.
Not sure. Okay. And there are some doubts about vacancy. The configuration of the buildings. There's two photos showing the front of one building,
Yep,
the kitchen design and Delco. And there are three premises, so presumably that other building that we don't really see a photo of is the third premise, is that correct?
yeah, that's what it looks like, and I honestly don't know why I didn't give you guys more pictures, but that's a very observant statement. Yes, it does appear that there's a third premise in that other building, and it doesn't appear that I've included a photo of it.
At any rate, we have some vacancy issues here.
Correct.
Okay. That's all my questions. Mr. Newfelt.
Thank you. So we've given you on page 3 the same form the city had. This is the 2017 questionnaire. And we also provided the 2016 questionnaire on page 4. So you can see that they lost their tenants, Bridget Kitchens and Paintball Paradise. Paintball Paradise likely at end of term, and Bridget Kitchens before the end of term. And Dalco, I'm assuming, renewed. Although, let's just see, did their rent change? No, the rent is listed as the same. So they occupy the greatest part of the space. They occupy part of the space in one building and part of the space in the other, whereas Paintball only occupied the frontage on the westernmost building. And that's why they're at 41% space vacant at the time of this questionnaire. And no, I haven't followed up to see if they've backfilled that space yet. The valuation we did, it looks like we have very close to the same gross rent as the assessor. So there are times when we hit the same numbers, and this is one of them. But we believe a greater vacancy is called for, and what we did on the vacancy is looked at the retail in Winnipeg, the St. James in Winnipeg, and then the actual. Now, we prorated it to 16%, because it was a part year, and of course this was just a period in time. And so rather than 41%, we put 16%. And you've always got to stabilize this. But this is, as we were discussing earlier, you got 3 units and you get 1 vacant, it's a big hit. And 2 is even worse. So this in there shows the risk. So as a result of doing that, we're only looking at 9.6% vacancy, just averaging those out as a way of stabilizing. So an earlier question was,
So what, you're averaging what, sorry?
we're averaging out the stabilized actual vacancy with market vacancies.
Oh, okay.
And coming to 9.6% rather than the actual 41%. So a question earlier was, if you're full, why should your vacancy rate be so high? The answer is now, when you're really vacant, your vacancy rate wouldn't be that high, because somewhere the market has an equilibrium, and it's the responsibility of the person doing the valuation to find an equilibrium.
The space won't stay vacant forever, but a 9.6, 10% is very reasonable under the circumstances. We didn't apply the non-recoverable simply because they have given us no data to provide it, and I think the assessor's right. They just put all their expenses in one category, and they did claim it's a net lease, but we don't have the backup on the recoveries to show that, and I think that's fair. If we have the data, we should claim the non-recoverables. If we don't, awfully difficult. Now, moving to the cap rate, as you can see, we've calculated a need for retail for 23 parking spots, and there are only 14. So this means that when new tenants move in, new occupancy permits, there will have to be some consideration of what sort of tenant they can actually attract, who could, first of all, live with less parking. More important than the bylaw, can they live with less parking? And that would be a limited, not a full retail user, which is going to limit their appeal in the marketplace. The other issue is clear that, and I have to be very, very careful, because nothing has ever been proven that there are any environmental issues on this site. However, Quinton's did have a dry cleaning facility on the site when it was first built. They did full service dry cleaning. Now their garments are all go to 332 Nassau, and no longer the carbon tetrachloride and their derivatives were phased out in the 80s. However, the concern I would have is that when this property goes to market, the vendor's Quinton's, a phase one won't be adequate. It'll be a phase two. So, and there'll be some market resistance to this, because whether they're guilty or not, there will be a requirement for a phase two, and it will likely be the bank that requires it, or any lender, because no one wants to land on the site. Now, I suspect it may or may not come in fully clean. It could very well be. But the problem is that we call it in our business market resistance to detrimental conditions, whether it's proven or not. Forces the phase two, which is a minimum of $20,000 in costs, and reluctance on the lender's part, meaning that the riskier, deemed riskier, not ability to get the best loan coverage. A lot of lenders in our marketplace won't touch a site, impacted or not, if there's enough there that they could worry about. And I mentioned these people before, but the Ontario Teachers Pension Fund, big-time investors in real estate, won't touch a site like this. And all of the European investors, and I can say this with some certainty, won't touch this site. Half of the local North American investors won't do it. So it's going to drive up the cost of lending, which equals and relates fully to the cap rate. And an explanation of that is on page 26 of my brief. And this is the mortgage equity concept. And it shows that in order to get a low cap rate, you need good lending. And if you don't have good lending, you're driving your cap up. That's the bottom line, and that's why on this case we're looking at 8.5%. The difference between this site from the last assessment and this assessment is the loss of tenancy. Oh, sorry, there's our explanation on the vacancy. I missed this. 41% vacant in 2017, so one of the sites was leased up, so the chronic vacancy is 16% over 2 years. Sorry, I missed that, which we've brought down to 9.6%. I think that's really the difference between this year and last year. Thank you, that's my presentation.
Mr. Colatulio.
Just a question again in regards to the, you were saying it's not a known thing, like it's not a contaminated site, it's not registered as a contaminated site anywhere?
No, check out the book here.
Okay, yeah, so if they were to list this property, they don't have to disclose that there might potentially be some issue from a previous tenant,
Well,
or? something that occurred 30
I
plus
guess you'd
years
have
ago?
to look at the name on the title.
Okay,
It's Quinton's Limited.
okay,
I don't think they're getting away from that one. It's got in my appraisal work, what happens is the bank usually triggers the call and goes through its list of requirements. Sometimes it's just a phase one, which is a desk review, couple $1,000. This would be a guaranteed phase two, which is drilling holes.
okay.
Now, they find nothing, it doesn't matter. It's still gonna be a more difficult borrowing situation.
Okay. And then just in regards to, what is the contaminated site?
It's not contaminated.
Right, it's not that we know of,
Not that
right?
we know of.
Right. And the vacancy at 6%, 16%. Part of the reason you wouldn't use a higher vacancy, the 41%, is you start looking at an income workup, 41% vacancy, and then your land value would take over. That's
Well,
correct, right?
exactly, you've lost the
Right,
highest and
right.
best use at that point in time.
Okay. So-
I've always argued the break even is closer to 15%,
Right.
then you have to start reconsidering it.
Okay.
Unless you've got restrictions that you have to lease, to people.
Yeah. And then with regards to the cap rate at 8.5, location-wise, I would think that this one's better. This is right on Portage than McLeod or some of the other ones
Yeah,
that we
no,
looked
I
at
don't
earlier.
disagree with you. I think it's a better, a good location is where the people are. Now, the advantage to, for example, McLeod is if you drew a 3 or a 5 kilometer radius around it, you'd pick up a greater population in that ring. And on Portage Avenue, the difficulty there with the population is you draw your ring, you automatically have to exclude everything south of the river. And then on going north, the depth of St. James stops at the airport, Saskatchewan Avenue. So it's wide, but it's narrow. So when we do we do population ring analysis, so that's the problem with Portage Avenue.
Okay. So you still feel the 8.5 is
With-
more
with-
applicable?
Yeah, it's a small site, it's vulnerable to the vacancies, whether it's right or wrong, it's gonna be impacted by additional costs, and market resistance, on the lending side, which directly relates to the cap.
Okay. No further questions.
Ms. Riffle?
Yes. Could you tell me when Quinton's left this property? You said that it was the mid-'80s that
Well, no,
they
no,
stopped using this cleaning?
No, I said
plant?
they shifted their dry cleaning from local sites to Nassau. That was phased in, I think, from the late '80s to the mid-'90s. As to when they were last had their site in it, let me just check something here. I have, going back to 2013.
Do you have the vacancy rates going back to 2013? What were they historically between 2000 and...
I'm just looking. 2013, they had, appears that they had just left, and they were in the site that went to Bridget Kitchens.
Okay.
So I believe that's when they left. And that wouldn't be characterized as a vacancy when they relocate necessarily. Okay, 2014, no vacancy listed. And tenants were AAA Consignment, Bridget Kitchens, Delco, and Phoenix Sports. So obviously Phoenix Sports turned over, and so did AAA Consignment.
Sorry, I used to be with a different firm, and my folder went back another 10 years. I've only
That's
got-
okay, if you can't find it, you can't
Yeah,
find it. I was just curious if you had any historical vacancy information.
Well, the 2014, there were 2 tenant turnovers, and I don't know how long they lasted. I'm just trying to find the next mailer to see when they were backfilled. I've got one from 15, and as of 15, the current roster was in place, so they've been in place from 15 to 17. So I think that as a site, it has a periodic vacancy, but it's always ended up being relet, which is why we didn't use 41%, we didn't use 16%, but we think it's higher than normal, 9.6.
Okay, thank you.
And is that indicative of its location, or more indicative of the fact that it only had 3 tenants, and of course, when somebody leaves,
Well, yeah, the two reasons. One is, like I said, you lose one tenant, which is natural, to have turnover. So if you lose one tenant for 6 months every 5 years, you're automatically guaranteed a vacancy risk of 6.6%, just on that basis alone. I think you did the math right, but.
I'm not gonna try it.
But I think the other factor to look at is changing retail trends, where, Portage Avenue, busy thoroughfare, the place to go for the neighborhood, and changing retail trends, moving to power centers. This turns into more of a transition zone rather than a destination zone for retail, less interest in being on it. You got Polo Park at one end, and Unicity, and the other malls in the area at that end. So when you're in a transition zone, then you're appealing to just the local people. And as I said, the local market is thin. The geographic separation from Charleswood and the outer limits of the city make it more difficult in that respect. And if you think on that stretch on Portage, and think who in that stretch that goes from Portage all the way to Westwood, how many national tenants are on that strip? And there's a Tim Hortons. And I'm just trying to recall what all is there. And that's what the changing nature of retail.
So this is, you're not too far off on your rents, it's $9-10. The cap is, you're sticking with 8.5?
Yeah.
It's 8.5 or it's 7.
There's no growth potential here, and that's the big reason.
Yet it's on Portage Avenue. Lots of visibility. Is that
Sure.
an advantage, or is it a disadvantage because nobody feels like they can stop because they're carried along by so much traffic? At what point is that breaking?
Yeah, well, and that's one of the things we see in our business is the decades of watching and observing the retail trends and where people are gonna end up being. The bigger a city gets, the more transition zones you have. And you imagine yourself and put yourself in your commuting phase, and how many people are stopping in their commute to get something. If it's convenient on the right side of the road and there's no traffic, you may go there. But if you're turning into transition roads, and that's what Portage has turned into on certain stretches, and even think of the big shopping areas, Polo Park, it isn't the Portage where it's hot. You gotta go down St. James to hit the major retail. So get off Portage and onto the feeder streets. St. Vital Center, it's not necessarily St. Mary's, that's the key, it's Meadowwood, where it's contained. And what we're seeing on the retail demand is the focus on the power center locations, there's a new phase coming up in retailing that's going to be more of a, I don't know what they call it, village style or something. Pretend you're in a neighborhood, but it's a neighborhood of stores. That's the latest one that'll come. We moved from shopping centers
in the sixties, power centers, and there's the next phase coming up. And what this does, when people argue rents are going up, yes, they are, but only in the good parts of town. The old parts are suffering and their rents are dropping, because it becomes a local user. So if you have a convenience store, used to be video stores, they're gone, a coffee shop,
Gas station.
yeah, well, I don't know, I got an electric car now, one of ours, so don't stop anymore.
I think that's got my questions. Thank you very much. We will move along. Down the road, or is it up the road? Mr. Colatrulio.
Okay, file number 19-308, the roll number 0702-140-5500. The address is 1799 Portage Avenue. Roll year 2020 with an April 1st, 2018 reference date. The assessed value under appeal, $2,062,000, class code 60, and the liability is taxable. We have one building, 8 premises, with an actual year built of 1947 and an effective year built of 1960. The total leasable area on file for this property is 23,803 square feet. And if you flip to page 2, you'll see that the owner has responded to both of our requests for information. There is some subject sales history, though I will say that this one here is post-reference. This actually should have been removed from the brief. So keep that in mind, post-reference information on page 2. That September 17th sale is past the April 1st, 2018 reference date. There is, however, a sale there January 7th of 2015, and that's at $1,650,000. The bottom of page 2, you'll see the subject leases that are in place. We indicate a range of net rents ranging from $2.80 a square foot all the way up to $11.80 at the high end of that range. If you flip to page 3, you'll see the rental comparables that I've used for this particular property. We might start to veer off page count here again, just due to the double page for the rental comparables. But the range that we're looking at is between $12 and $23.26 for the rental comparables that I've selected. My page 5, I don't know if it's page 4 for you guys, it probably is. Page 4 is the income workup, correct?
Mhm.
Yeah, and so again, we have a total of 23,803 square feet for a total potential rent of $179,028, 4% vacancy loss, 2% non-recoverable expense allowance, and shortfall at $8 a square foot, for a net operating income of $160,813. The overall cap rate applied is 7.80, and I'll just point to the fact that this property is categorized as a neighborhood shopping center, not as a strip mall, so hence the different cap than what we were looking at a little bit prior. But again, there's many things that play into that cap rate: age, size, location, etc. The capitalized and rounded value at $2,062,000. Your guys' page 5 will just be a summary of the income workup as produced by the model. Page 7 is the map view, or sorry, page 6 for you guys is the map view showing the subject parcel. It's an interior lot located on Portage Avenue between Marjorie Street and Hampton Street. Page 7 is some aerial photos, again just showing the subject property, variety of different angles. This property has actually been referenced earlier in the day through the cap rate analysis in Mr. Neufeld's brief. Page 8 for you guys is just the street view of the subject property, showing the various tenants and showing the various buildings. Page 9 is just the rear view of the subject property, taken from Google from the lane. Page 10 is the property income and expense questionnaire as submitted to us by the owner. They do indicate gross income. So again, as to why we're showing net rents on page 2, I'm not too certain, but they indicate here gross. They do indicate some recoveries though. It doesn't look like taxes are recovered in full. There might be some shortfall on utilities and maintenance, and general admin for sure there's some shortfall. So semi-gross is probably what the lease arrangement would be for this particular property. They show the tenants on page, it'll be your guys' page 12 of the brief. And so you can see the net lease has not been checked out here. They indicate that the tenant pays, which services are included in the rent paid by the landlord? Oh, so included in the rent is taxes, insurance, management, hydro, water, sewer, heating, waste and snow removal, maintenance and repair. It looks like cleaning and caretaking is the responsibility of the tenant. And marketing and advertising as well as not being checked off there. My page, or your page 14, again, is the cap rate table that we show. So this property, because it's characterized as neighborhood shopping center, falls under that category on this table. The 20th percentile is 7.15%, and the 80th percentile is 7.30%. And so we're on the higher end of the range for that type of property, beyond the 80th percentile. Page 15 for you guys is just some excerpts from the Municipal Assessment Act, and page 16 through to the back is just the standard city addenda package. That is my presentation for this property. I'm open to any questions.
Mr. Neufeld?
Thank you. Page 4 done by the model.
I believe so, yes.
And the square footage on here, 23,803, where'd that come from?
This would just be the historic city record for this property.
So it hasn't been inspected to determine if there's actually a rentable?
It may have been inspected. I don't know if someone went and measured leasable area, or I'm not sure if that's what you're asking. If
Right.
someone went and checked out the leasable space of that 23,000, that's just the area that the city had allocated to this property.
On
The
the-
gross floor area is higher, but we have a lower leasable
Right.
area.
On the tenant submission, and I'm not referring to the one on page 10, but the one on the rent roll, page 12, did you add that up?
No, I haven't gone through that exercise.
Well, I was just gonna say, did you see that two of the premise IDs that you have in the basement don't exist? 1,200 square feet and 800 square feet?
They do not appear on here, correct?
Yeah, so, can you verify that there's actually leasable?
So the two you're referencing on page 4 of my brief, the ones that are tagged 08, correct? The substandard basement areas? So I personally can't verify the space, but typically if there was space there, substandard basement space could sometimes be used as storage space. Yeah, the actual extent of what it's being used for, what's there, I can't really speak to today.
Yeah, but and you haven't seen it to see if it has any merit, use, does it?
Correct.
Okay. Did you look at the bowling alley rent? Now, their face rent is $2,600 a month, plus some recoveries, correct?
It looks like 2,800?
Oh,
Am I reading that right?
I don't know, yeah, maybe I got an old one here, I had 2,600. Oh, I used last year's, my apologies. Yeah, 2,800.
2,800 is what I show.
2,800, okay. And so if that were, the face rent anyway, would then work out to a value of $280 a foot, right?
Correct.
And you've got it at $473.
Correct.
Those are my questions.
Ms. Rempel?
Yes, I noticed that in terms of the leases for this property, there are 4 out of the 6 that have expired. If you take unless they have been renewed.
Oh, yeah, you're
I
right.
guess that's my question. On page 2, it looks like some of them expired quite a while ago, in fact. So I'm wondering if you have any information about whether those have been renewed. And I see on this statement that you were just referring to, which was filed in 2018, those leases indicate the same expiry dates, but it looks like those businesses are still there.
Yeah, so the only thing I'll point out about if you're looking at the tenant verification form.
Yeah.
Is that it looks like it's the 12 months ending July 31st of 2017.
Right.
So it only takes us about halfway through the year. I would probably look to the next year's mailer. Now, it's not included, it would be post-reference. But that would kind of give us a sense of whether these people have either continued operating on some sort of month-to-month scheme on their existing lease, or if they've re-signed at a higher rate, or that's where I would start. But as to can I speak to it right now, not really.
I noticed that St. James Bowling Lane, it looks like their lease expired in 2014.
Yes, it does appear that way on this tenant verification form.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
You want to see on your phone if you can book something at the St. James Lanes, and we'll figure this out. So we have an issue here with vacancy then,
Potentially.
potentially. And you're using your standard 4%?
Correct.
Because you weren't aware, and you're not sure.
I'm not sure on, as of the reference date, which tenants were in, right? So the form that I have in front of me today only takes me to July of 17. And again, it's been pointed out that some of those are even expired. So whether they're there or not, I would probably think that they're most likely still there because they're still showing it on that form.
We're not gonna make an issue of vacancy if it helps.
To point it out and say it's vacant, it's hard for me to say.
Then Mr. Newfield, you will probably help us here and reveal all, if we could have your evidence.
Yes. I have a bit of a problem. I appraised this property when it sold on the sale for
15?
January 2015. And I have some concerns about the reliability of what the assessors presented on page 10 and what I presented on the top of page 3. I'm concerned about its reliability, and rather than get into any details of trying to reconcile it or fix it, I think I'd prefer that we just treat it as unreliable, and then as a result, we're left with the model. You can see that it does indicate a much lower income. I'm unfortunately in a difficult situation where I can't agree with this.
You have different dates here, though.
Well, it's not just that, I'll give you an example. Line 201 for insurance is $18,625, which is 85 cents a foot. Now, 18 cents a foot is far more typical. So what I'm concerned of here is I don't disagree that this number is accurate. I'm concerned that it may apply to a greater operation than just the subject property. So I don't think there's any knowledge, something done with intent or knowledge or foresight. I think it's just we got a statement, we gotta give you, assessor, what we got, and we're not gonna change it. The same with the property management side, so, and I know that they don't coincide with my own valuation. So, let's just leave it that, I'm gonna look at the assessor's brief and tell you what's wrong with it. And what's wrong with it is, I'm looking at this page 4, that there is no other rentable space in the basement. It's all just the bowling alley. So his premise ID number 26681 and 29067 do not exist. That income should be stricken off. The other rents.
Sorry, which ones?
1,200 square feet for a potential rent of $37.20, and the 800 square feet for a potential rent of $25.68, they don't exist. The bowling alley rent, this is something I scrutinized an awful lot, on the bowling alley rent, disregarding the concept of statement unreliability, a basement rent is never considered on the main floor, and with dividing the cost. A basement rent is always deemed to be a contribution to overhead. And that's how you would add it. Their contribution to overhead is the rent that they have listed, which is $33,160. The assessor has $56,760. So the difference is $23,160. So the potential rent, just based on the assessor's workup, should be $149,588.
149 what?
588. Now, since I'm not applying my own valuation, I can't be expected to provide my own numbers. So I've followed through the assessor's workup on those two issues I brought up, and the NOI comes to $133,748. He's got a cap of 7.8%. It did cap for its sale a few years ago at 7.96. No contrary evidence, so 7.8% produces a value of $1,714,718, rounded to $1,715,000. $715,000. Yeah, and I apologize for this workup. I think the people who did it, I haven't been doing these workups, and I'm worried about conflicts of interest and issues like that. And rather than conflict my interests, I'll simply say I prefer not to rely on this, and let's just deal with the assessment workup. And that would be my request, is to modify the assessor's brief solely on removing that space that is not rentable, and calling the basement bowling alley a contribution to overhead at the number they had quoted, which is $2,800 a month, or $33,600 per annum, not the $56,760.
Mr. Beltrovio?
I understand what Mr. Neufeld does. I have no questions.
Okay. Ms. Rempel?
No, I have no questions, thank you.
Nor do I.
Now, I would point out that if you took my NOI, 133,748, and looked at the sale price from before, my cap rate looks awfully accurate in my own workup. And this was my concern here, is that I have done this. I don't think the income's changed by anything over the last 3 years. So it is what it is. Thank you.
All right, we will move on then to 99 Osborne Street. Mr. Beltrovio, when you are ready.
File number 19-4730, the roll number 1203-211-6000, the address 99 Osborne Street, roll year 2020 with an April 1st, 2018 reference date. The assessed value under appeal, $1,706,000, class code 60 and taxable. One building, 7 premises, 2 stories, actual year built 1975 with no effective age applied. The total leasable area is 11,783 square feet, and that was actually part of the recommendation. There was a review done on this property. There was a change to the total leasable area. That's where you're seeing this recommendation come from. The revised figure with the changes to the leasable area, $1,540,000.
Mr. Newfield, your reaction to that?
Thank you very much. We'll carry on.
Yeah, no worries.
Yep.
Correcting an error is always good.
Yeah.
Now, this doesn't fall under the category of, if I don't take his recommendation, you're not obligated to process it, because it's a correction of a physical error, not a difference in opinion value, correct?
You would agree?
I'm asking the board.
Oh.
I'm asking you.
If you don't accept it, you
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
feel.
well, because it's not a recommendation based on a change in opinion of value, it's a
Yeah,
physical.
correct. Yeah, correct. A change in physical characteristics that led to a reduced NOI on this property is basically how this recommendation came about. If you flip to page 2 of the brief, you'll see that the owner has responded to all of our requests for income information, including the 2017 property sale questionnaire. Again, this is under that portfolio we discussed in the earlier properties. The subject sale history, March 7th of 2017, sworn value at $1,500,000. The subject leases that we show in place vary in regards to rental rates between $6.50 a square foot, upwards of $21.37 a square foot. If you flip to page 3, you'll see that I've, page 3 and 4 probably for you guys as well. I provided a lot of comparables on this one because there are a lot of comparables from within Osborne Village that you can look to. Now, there is a range in regards to the rental rates that you see, but the low end of that range would be $8.94, and they can go as high as $30 a square foot for Osborne Village. Now, if you look at page 4, that's the continuation of the comparables. Page 5 is the income workup for the revised figure as produced by the model. So we have a total leasable area, 11,783 square feet. The potential rent is $137,015, 6% vacancy loss. So this property we have categorized as street front retail, and because there's no parking, the retail, when you're comparing them between retail and strip malls and NSCs, typically the street front retails have higher cap rates. So, and also slightly higher on the vacancy allowance at 6% compared to the 4% for the strip malls that we were just looking at. 2% non-recoverable expense allowance and shortfall at $650 a square foot. The net operating income here is $121,623, and the overall cap rate 7.90%. For a capitalized and rounded value at $1,540,000. Page 6 again is just a summary of that. Page 7 is the map view of the subject parcel. This is an interior lot located on Osborne Street. Page 8 is some aerial photos of the subject property. There has been some work to refresh the exterior. I believe the aerial photo on the bottom of page 8 is prior to that renovation to the exterior cladding. I don't really know if that has an impact in any way on the value. I know that we did not issue a supplemental for that work. But it was done, and it's as you can see on page 9, the street view photos reflect the property as it currently stands. Page 10 is a rear view of some of the parking to the rear of the property. Page 11 through 14 is the blank mailers. Again, the owners here have opted to send the rent roll and the annual statement. Again, because they purchased in March of 2017, it's only 10 months, so keep that in mind. But you can see here on page 15, the rent roll for this particular property. And you can see that the annual statement for the 10-month period there on pages 16 through 18. Just a quick look through here. There's nothing really that sticks out to me as extraordinary in regards to line items that are included. They do list, though, some non-operating expenses, some admin fees and leasing commissions. Page 19 is the property sale questionnaire. Again, I'll just point to the sworn value, 1.5 million. But again, they show that they're not aware if that's the correct total sales price. They do show arm's length transaction, no other items other than the real estate included. We've kind of gone over this stuff already, so I won't bore you guys with it. Though at the bottom, they do indicate that the facade renovation estimated 2017 and 18. So just for a timeline as to when that occurred, there is kind of an indication there. Page 20 is just the remainder of that property sale questionnaire. Page 21 isn't very relevant because we don't show the street front retail range like we do for strip malls and neighborhood shopping centers. And even the brokerage firms that put out these cap rate studies, they don't typically report on those types of retail space either. Page 22 is some excerpts from the Municipal Assessment Act, and page 23 through to the back of the brief is the standard city addenda package. That's my presentation for this property. I'm open to any questions.
Mr. Neufeld?
Yes, so I've got your brief here. Now, my first question is, were we at the end of the toilet paper roll?
Yeah, I apologize. The printer does that sometimes.
Okay.
Oh, you got color. I didn't get color.
Did yours go, they're in black and white?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's not good. It should be in color.
Well, I got it.
Oh, no, the photos are in color.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is the blue on the top here. Page 5 and 6, which is your correction, so the rest of it is all by the model?
Correct, yeah.
Now, what was your change in the model for this type of property from the last assessment cycle to this one?
Ooh, I'm not certain on that. I don't have the previous work.
I heard 15% being thrown around by your colleagues.
15%
Increase in value.
on average?
Yeah,
Ooh, I'm not certain that it's that low.
okay.
I know when we were looking at preliminary numbers, some of them were north of 20%.
Oh, okay.
But again, it's preliminary
Right.
numbers. I don't have the actual average.
15, 20, yeah. My question here is that last cycle, it was assessed at 997,000 by the model. And I always ask that question.
Yep.
And now it's at 1,706,000. So why the big change? Was there a change in classification of some sort? I got neighborhood shopping center.
Do you have the workup of the previous one?
Oh, yeah. Neighborhood shopping center, retail. Slight change in cap. Massive change in revenue. And that's at the larger space too, so that hadn't been adjusted downward. So we should always sit beside each other so we can hand each other notes.
Yeah, to me, it could be quality variables that have been adjusted for certain premises that are driving the rents up. But again, because it's not something that I did myself, I can't really speak to. The parameters, though, appear to be the same. The retail would be what would drive the cap rate and that sort of stuff.
But on same size before the change, 997 to 1706 is higher increase than you've seen then.
Higher than an average, yeah. Now, averages, you gotta take, there's some that are gonna be lower than the average, there's some that are gonna be higher than the average.
Those are my questions and on that.
Ms. Mempel?
I have no questions at this time, thank you.
So your vacancy is 6% model. At April 1st, 2018, what sort of change had there been in vacancy in the that block in Osborne Village? Can you say overall?
Any indication as to the actual, is that what you're asking? What the
Yeah,
actual
yeah,
vacancy was? No, I don't have that with me. Normally, when the owners would fill out the property income and expense questionnaire, there is a portion there that you can put your average percentage of vacancy. But because they've instead just attached their rent roll and their annual statement, to me, if you're looking at the rent roll, it looks like they have tenants in place as of, and this rent roll shows as of the reference date, April 1st of 2018. So to me, it looks like they're leased up. And it looks like the full lease area that we're applying, there's some slight difference in the overall. They show on the rent roll 11,818 square feet. And we come in slightly lower at 11,783 square feet of leasable area. To me, fully leased up, so no vacancy as of the reference date, according to the rent roll.
And looking more broadly, though, at the area, is it on an upswing, a decline? What's the?
I think Osborne Village is tough to speak to because there is an ebb and flow that happens there. It seems like some buildings have issues of chronic vacancy, and they persist. Some buildings have turnover and they're scooped up right away. So it's hard to really speak to the overall trends. But yes, there can be periods of high turnover in Osborne Village. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
And that was my only question. Mr. Newcroft.
Thank you. As I promised earlier, I do have some rebuttal information late, and I'm not spending a lot of time on it. This is what I was referring to earlier. 1, 2, 3, one for each of the P3 files.
Sure.
And all this was to, I had said earlier about, we had warned the assessor that's probably not a good idea to use this information. And the cover letter is attached here and we warned them. And for example, page 21 shows 99 Osborne is on the list, as is 797 McLeod. And what are other properties we heard today? All of these ones, the 6 properties we heard today involving P3 as we manage them all. Now, the issue here is we've given fair warning. 276 Marion is here, fair warning that we're worried about its reliability. Don't misuse this information. And so nothing new, just verification that we warned in advance. So that's just a follow-up from the earlier rebuttal.
Thank you.
I'm ready to move on.
Move on.
Okay, good. The assessor is correct. It is its own little market area. Osborne Village. It's a different characteristics entirely, and there's no parking is a big issue in terms of competition or comparing it to elsewhere. But in Osborne Village, nobody has parking. So I think that the key there is be careful on your comps. Don't wander too far away from anybody else doing that. The vacancy rates are actually, it's strange, they're not published on the cover pages of our Johnson report, but they are tracked, and it is 6.4% in Osborne, and we put it in at 5 and the assessor's at 6. This time he's right. I'm not going to change it because a point or two isn't the reason we're here. We did the same thing again with the rent, and at the bottom left side of the page is, the 10-month period was 77, we adjusted it to 92. The next year, post-reference, was 88. It is showing an improvement because the 2016 number that was presented 2 years ago was 59,585. So we are seeing upward movement. So this all supports what I've been saying about the planning on this site. But at the time, it was 80,451. As with the other properties, the cap rate should recognize the upside potential on the rents. To make sure we've taken them to fee simple, our adjustment is to take it from an expected cap of 8.5, we'll change that to 8%. That comes to a value of $1,005,638, rounded to $1,006,100,600, which is higher than last year's assessment. Now, last year's assessment is under appeal. Now, the big reason for the appeal is the difference in square footage, which, since the assessors already offered us a correction, we know we're gonna win that appeal. And we'll be gracious to win it. We would accept the change in the square footage alone, just to close that file off, which will probably drop that to 900,000 or so. And now we're saying it's $1 million, which is 11% increase, roughly. And I think that's fair. That's what the market should see. Thank you.
Mr. Colatrulio?
Just a question in regards to, I know you presented the rebuttal just quickly. You said something about, you gave fair warning that the statements were unreliable, but then you're using the actual income from those statements. Is that,
Well,
is there an issue with that?
no. What we're trying to say is that I just want to see how much my refund is here from the previous year. That's all. Okay. Is a warning that if you're going to use it, you need to be armed with a bit more information and understand the nature of that. So every statement and every property is different. We object to anybody just simply taking an income and expense form and saying this is the income without asking the question. As it goes to cap rates, the big concern is if you're going to use a cap, you have to use it at the exact time of sale, not an income expense form provided a few years earlier. The last property, 1799 Portage, we don't manage it, but I would warn on that too, is that there's some expenses in there that don't belong to the real estate. Reported properly, but again, they had no way of splitting. They give you what's under their care and control. With this property, we've discussed what the issues are with it. So if someone has a fuller understanding of it and then presents that with the proper, in the proper context, that's fine. It even goes to the IAAO standards. They say don't use multi-row sales, but then they go on to say, it's in that book, anything I handed out, if you do more due diligence, you can.
Now, the net rent you used, the $779, to me, when I was looking within Osborne Village, seemed very low. That was part of the reason I provided a lot of comparables from within Osborne. There is a range, but they're not necessarily that low. And I'm looking at your comparables on page 7, and I don't see a single one within Osborne Village. So, did you look at all to market rents for Osborne Village, or?
I personally have. They're not in here. The reason we're lower is we're reflecting the split level nature here. The basement rents aren't producing at anywhere near the level that the upper level rents are, and there's nothing at grade. So any site in this property is either a step up or a step down, and a lot of the rents are going to be at grade. So do they compare? Kind of hard. You're going to want to look at other units, and there's only there's one unit across the street, and I don't have the rents for that one, and that's similar to that, and that's kind of what set me off on it. The closest we have is split level was the office at 1483 Pembina, which, oh, it's not even in here, never mind, I can't quote that. In this case, the paid rents are a really good indication of what you should expect.
Okay. I have no further questions.
Ms. Vimple?
No questions, thank you.
Well, back on that rent, so where do I see substantiation of the 779?
In the statement, but it's working backwards, it's a gross rent, so you take the revenue less the expenses divided by the square footage. Because there are no net rents to speak of, the rent we're presenting is a calculation of net on the entire building. And that's gonna vary from floor to floor.
Well, actuals
Yeah.
would if you saw the actuals, but
Yeah, and looking at the actuals on.
you're saying this is the blended,
Yeah, on page.
whereas his blended is 1163.
Right. Looking at the paid rents on the assessor's page 15. So the expenses are about $950 a foot. So when you take that into account, then you look at the first one, Shout Clothing, which is downstairs. They're collecting on a gross basis about $15.50 a foot. So their net is $6. And then when you move up to Hush Clothing, and they're at $14 a foot. So, and then you get to the top floors, upstairs in the
You're
village.
saying 14 net?
14 net. So I've got, one I said was at 6, then the first, the basement, then the second is at 14, and then moving up to upstairs in the village, quickly looking at these rents, the net on one unit is $3, and on the other unit, it's $7. So that's where the answer comes in. It's 6, 14, 7, and that's how we get our rates. Obviously, the second floor, the most visible floor, is getting the best rents.
What's the spread between 50% between lower and upper?
No, it's divide everything by 1/3 basically. So a third are getting, and I haven't done all of the calculations here, because there's actually Noodle House gets $10, but and say Rings and Things gets $5. Oh, sorry, it's $6.50. Bang on, they're getting full recoveries there. I just see that. That's a new lease. That's why. See that?
Mm.
So we have 7, Noodle House at 10, Rings and Things 7, Crepe is going to be 8, $8.50 I should say. Hush is going to be around 14 on the first unit, and on their second unit, their add-on, it's 9. First upstairs is 8. Second upstairs is 12. That was the add-on space recovering, and the last upstairs is at 4. So it's all across the board.
And that was the calculation that, no, you didn't do that individually to come up with the 779.
No.
You took the gross figures, the two figures.
Exactly. We
Worked it to
took everything,
779.
because and obviously, as we went through that, we've identified 2 sites that are on full recoveries, and then everybody else is on partial recoveries. And when you get that sort of mix, and the other argument would be, if you have somebody like Spicy Noodles, shouldn't they pay more utilities than, and the Crepe Place, shouldn't they pay more utilities than a clothing store? So until this is worked out with lease changes, Spicy noodle won't change till 2024. Crepe won't change, just must have changed recently, post-reference. And so that's what we're looking at right now.
Okay, those are all my, any other questions?
Sorry.
Sure.
I'm just thinking, isn't there another area of Osborne Street just down the street that's the same kind of configuration closer to River?
Yeah, 470
One-
River.
121, right? 121, is that 121 Osborne?
I think so, yeah.
Wait,
That's
Because
the
you're
next
at
one under review,
99, so 121,
No, I was thinking, where, Toad in the Wall or whatever is in.
that's across the street,
That's an
isn't
even
it?
number, yeah.
That's
That-
across the street.
Yeah, that's another one of these three-story walk-up designs. 121
This
is,
is- Look
I
at the
think it's-
picture on page
It's the
9.
next file.
I think it's
The
right.
next one under
Oh,
appeal.
it's the next file, okay. Well, I think that it's exactly the same configuration as the one that we're talking about
The only
here.
thing I think there
And I'm
is,
looking at the comparables, and it looks like the rent is quite a bit higher there. Maybe it's a more desirable location, I don't know.
yeah, that's our next file here.
Okay, sorry.
Well, it'll be interesting to look at it.
yeah, it was part of the same,
It's the same complex, but
right,
just,
yes, that's correct.
All right, shall we move on there?
Just to clarify, Rocky, these are for every single file.
That's correct. You got enough?
Yep.
Just, yeah.
Okay. Mr. Colatulio, when you're ready.
Sure. File number 19-4732, the roll number 1203-2111000, the address 121 Osborne Street, roll year 2020 with an April 1st, 2018 reference date. The assessed value under appeal, $1,331,000. Classification 60 and taxable. We have one building with 11 premises, 2 stories. Total leasable area here, 10,044 square feet. And if you flip to page 2, you'll see that the owner, again, has responded to all of our requests for income information. And again, this is part of this portfolio sale that we're discussing today. March 7th, 2017, sworn value, 1.4 million. So the subject property leases show ranging between $10 a square foot to $18.93 a square foot. And yes, I believe you're correct in saying that there is a lower level, there is a main level, there is an upper level, and so it is very similar to the previous property we looked at in its physical arrangement.
On page 2, these are nets, these are not gross or semi-gross.
Well, again, we show it as net here, but when you're looking at the statements, we do show recoveries. It's just whether or not the recovery is a full recovery. So, I'm not certain on it. I'm not certain as to whether they're true net leases. Some of them may be, depending on whether or not their portion of the recoveries is in full. But we'll see that later on the rent roll. Page 3 is the rental comparables that I've used again for Osborne. I did use the 99 Osborne Street in here, and if some of those are semi-gross, then that may be problematic. But there are other comparables that are in here that show a range. If you're including the ones that we looked at previously, the Rings and Things, which was the newer lease, that's as low as $650 a square foot, and that one I believe we looked at and said there was full recoveries. and they go as high as, it's like $24 in this table that I've provided on page 3 and 4. So you flip to page 5, you'll see the model applied parameters. Again, 10,044 square feet. Potential rent, $118,503. 6% vacancy loss, 2% non-recoverable expense allowance, shortfall at $650 a square foot for a net operating income of $105,248. The overall capitalization rate, 7.9%, for a capitalized and rounded value at $1,332,000. Page 6 is again just a summary of the income workup. Page 7 is a map view showing the subject parcel. Again, this is an interior lot located on Osborne Street. Page 8 shows some additional aerial photos. You'll see that parking is limited to the rear of the building, and it looks like there may only be a few stalls. This property as well, if you're looking at the aerial photo on page 8, that reflects the exterior refresh that was done here. This was also, they did it for both properties, 99 Osborne as well as 121 Osborne. And page 10 is just a rear view, again, showing that there is very limited parking at the rear of the building. Page 11 through to 14 is the income and expense questionnaire. Again, they send us their rent roll and they send us the annual statement, 10-month period, as they purchased in March of 2017. The only thing here that I would, no free rent. There doesn't appear to be any line items that I would consider out of the ordinary for this property. The annual statement looks okay. They do list some non-operating expenses, totaling just shy of $4,200. Page 19, you'll see the property sale questionnaire. Again, it's part of the portfolio sale. Again, looking at the sworn value, 1.4. And we've covered all of the other issues with how this mailer is filled out. Or not issues, just the way that it's filled out. They're not aware of certain things. There is an appraisal, there's no permission, etc. And again, you can see at the bottom the facade reno, again, 2017, 2018. So just an indication as to when that occurred. Page 20 is the remainder of that property sale questionnaire. Page 21 is our cap rate table. Because it's storefront retail, again, you're not going to see that shown on here. Page 22 is some excerpts from the Municipal Assessment Act. And page 23 to the back of the brief is the standard city addenda package for this, for these properties, for what we've been presenting at the Board of Revision. That's my presentation for this property. I'm open to any questions.
Mr. Newell.
Thank you. Evaluation, like, all by the model this time?
I believe so, yeah.
Now, you had mentioned the statement was fairly straightforward, no major issues with the expenses. So $114,954 is roughly how much per square foot? $11?
Let's see here. You're talking,
The total
are
expenses.
you including the non-operating
Oh,
expenses?
take them out, 110,000. I don't care. It's
No, no, yeah,
it's
I know
not,
what
it's
you're
not
saying.
the point. 110,000, 10,000 square feet, math is simple, $11. we'll call
Okay,
it.
yeah.
Okay. So you were talking about, and I just want to clarify this, because I know that you didn't say that they were all net. But if you have operating costs of approximately $11 on your page 15, the actual rents are actually recover subtracting it from the 11 that costs.
Yeah.
So what you then have on presentation of net rents on page 2 is not accurate then. Well, actually, wait, there's two that are accurate. The canister is accurate. And what is that? That's the only one. I'm just, do you necessarily, I mean, they aren't
If they're not fully recovered, then I wouldn't say that they're net
Right.
rents.
So these aren't net rents, page 2?
I wouldn't say
Just-
so. Just a quick look at it looks like they're semi-gross
Yeah,
on some of
okay.
them. There may be one that's on a net, they fully recovered.
The
their-
canister, yeah, okay, thank you. Those are my questions, thanks.
Ms. Rupp?
I'm looking at the leaseholders here, the property leases, and then I'm looking at what has been presented by the owners on page 15. And I see that the third one down is Gongcha, which is not listed
Yeah, so it's actually really weird.
as
This,
a leaseholder on page 2.
yeah, this rent roll shows at the top left corner as of the reference date, April 1st, 2018.
Right.
But that Gong Cha doesn't look like it appears in place until 2 months later. So I'm not sure as to why it's being reported this way. Again, we're just relying on what's provided to us by the owner.
Post-reference.
Right, correct, yeah.
So what, how would they give you, it says as of 0401, start date 0601.
Right, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
It's 2
okay.
months later, I'm not sure how that got on
Just-
there.
That's all my questions.
No, that's a good
Thank you.
observation.
The calculation that Mr. Neufeld did just a moment ago, which indicated that on page 2, those rents are certainly not net. Does that calculation that he did support the model rents that you have on page 5, which range from 582 to 1270, no, 1574, and blended it's 1180?
Right. What was your range, Rocky? In semi-gross rents?
Oh, well, when I, quick conversion to net was between 5, 7, post-reference, 11, 9, 10, and 8.
Okay. So I would say our blended might be slightly higher than what those would suggest. It doesn't appear, when looking at Osborne Village, again, there is a range in the rents that you see there. And I don't think that the $11.80 blended, you calculated out the blended, I haven't done it myself. But yeah, it doesn't seem too unreasonable if that's what you're asking.
Okay. That's all my questions. Mr. Neufeld?
Yeah, the workup that we provided, I'm noting something I don't like on it. And what I don't like is that when the statement, in this case, is showing page 5 for this 10-month period of a net income of a little under $30,000. However, it's clear that we had 2 changes in rental status during that time period, and it was likely that the rents were done, but then they didn't catch up with the statement, because the statement is got the lag time on it. And by the time we got around to April, those rents were in place. So I'm trying to find a way of, I like simple reconciliations, and I don't see a simple one. Our number is too low. And the workup I just did here on the assessor's page 15, and this is a non-weighted average. However, the 2 largest rents, space rents, are fairly dominant on this. They're at $11 and $9. One's at 11, one's at 9. That's unit A and C. And then the upper levels and lower levels vary. But the actual rent roll to me, looks to be about 928 square foot, which is twice as high as what the statement would indicate. And that's not an unreasonable difference, because if you have two sites, all the costs were already in place, and then all of a sudden two rents jumped $5, $6, who knows what they jumped per foot, because they're getting recoveries now. That's all gravy, as they say, right to the bottom line. I got a simple way of dealing with this, because I like simple. Our net income should be twice as high, which means that my NOI should be twice as high. I like that for simple. So I was gonna just change that to 74,000. It's not accurate, it's simple. But the rent at 467 is not correct. It should be closer to 928. Nothing wrong with the person who prepared it. This is just, statements haven't caught up with the rent changes. So, and again, 8% is fine because we're growing. And so that's a value of 925,000 without rounding. So that's a 74. Now, some support for that is the actual statement from 2018. Yes, it's post-reference. I have it in my hand, and it's listed at 69,000 here. However, there is an expense item that I'm sure the assessor would object to, and maybe he should. So that actual 2018 income, on that basis, it's a $10,000 cost. So the actual 2018 as full is actually 79,000, and we're going to use 74,000 as our NOI. Why that's fair is because they actually had some vacancies in 2018. So that compares favorably, 78,000 versus 74,000. That's my support. It's post-reference. But it's a good analysis. So 74,000 NOI based on recalculating the assessor's provided rents here per unit on a net basis and applying 8%. Thank you. Short. Yeah,
I have no questions.
but
No questions.
I'll show you what I did. So that's the statement, I took that one out.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
That was what I thought.
I'd probably agree with a couple of those other ones too, but.
And I have no questions. Unless somebody wants to summarize, we have drawn to a conclusion. Thank you very
I
much.
just apologize for these two changes here. This is a complex issue, and I think we've addressed it right.
We like to get the best information, so thank you very much.
It's Friday, right?
It is Friday.
All day.